Cool.
All right, buddy, we are live. How you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah?
Yeah.
It's been about time since we had like a chat on the record.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. It's taken 9-10 years for us to get here.
Yeah. It's been a long haul of knowing each other, working together,
Yeah.
drinking, obviously, and then and talking shit forever.
Forever. Yeah. Cathartic.
Okay, so why don't we start at the beginning, yeah?
Sure.
So where are you from?
I'm from Winston-Salem, North Carolina. It's like a medium-sized city in the middle of North Carolina. Very suburban, very standard sort of suburban upbringing. I would say, like, lots of high school football games, soccer clubs growing up,
Yeah.
swim practice. Yeah.
But Winston-Salem, it's not the capital of North Carolina. Charlotte is, right? So it's what, like the second biggest route?
Charlotte's what everyone knows. Charlotte's definitely what's like bringing folks to the state more, I would imagine. But yeah, Winston's like second or third largest city. It's in what's called the Triangle area, which is Durham, Greensboro, Winston-Salem area. This area called the Piedmont Triad, and it's just like where so many families seem to settle down to raise their kids, and I was one of them.
There you go.
Yeah.
Wow. Where have I been? I've been to Spartanburg, which is South Carolina.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Totally.
to do some BMW training there because they have a huge BMW facility there.
Right.
I remember that.
For tough rides?
For Tough Rides Brazil, yeah, I did that. Every time I do a Tough Rides, I do a little refresher course
Sure.
because I don't own a motorcycle.
Yeah.
So I don't get to ride all the time. So it's good to take 3-4 days just to make sure you remember how to actually the biggest thing is just remembering how to fall.
Sure.
Getting used to falling again.
What is the secret to falling?
Just staying loose and aiming for the shoulder. I think
Like you want your shoulder to hit the ground.
Yeah. Because if you I guess the thing is you want to hit and roll.
And that doesn't pin your leg under?
Well, if you come off the bike, you usually kind of come off. So you try to clear from the bike and then shoulder and roll. Yeah.
Shoulder and roll in Spartanburg, South Carolina.
It could mean so many things. So did you play any did you play soccer when you were a kid? Everyone?
Definitely, yeah. I was everyone I knew was playing soccer, and same here. I thought like a lot of kids early on, I just wanted to do soccer forever.
Yeah.
But then you sort of I feel like sports at a young age, they're like sort of the stand-in for purpose and agency that you don't really have. And then I discovered filmmaking in middle school. And so soccer and filmmaking, filmmaking is a pretty generous word for what I was doing. But
in middle school?
Yeah, with a camcorder, yeah.
Using film at that stage?
It was like mini DV tapes. They they were like video cassettes, but those were the days. They were so faulty, and they would always end up glitching out. But there's something beautiful about you would record it to the mini DV tapes, and then you would have to plug in your camcorder to the computer and offload your footage by just playing it all back. And so you'd have to, if you shot an hour of footage, it would take an hour to get it onto your computer, and you were just sitting there watching everything you shot.
And it didn't speed it up or anything. It was just that 1x, just flat speed.
1x, yeah. 1-to-1, just real patient process, and really made you I guess consider how much you wanted to shoot, because it was
I find the same thing with photography. Back in the day, I used to shoot film, right?
Sure.
And you were way more conscious of shooting film because, every roll was $10 or $6 or whatever it was. And then you had to develop it, and then you had to scan it, and then you had to edit it.
Yeah.
And nowadays, you can put filters and presets on a digital camera and shoot 1,000 pictures of the same thing in 10 minutes. And then, just scroll through them as quickly as possible and pick out the two best ones. It's not even the same game anymore.
The burst mode, it's for it's unreal. I know there's something where I feel like we're missing from that that patient approach, but there's so much you can do with digital too. It's we've taken advantage of that digital ability so much. I can't really fault it, but I wish film was still as accessible, as there is something really like special and like so nice about the way it captures light and color. Still kind of unmatched.
Yeah. But still, you'd like to use some old equipment, don't you? Like, didn't you tell me you were shooting a music video like a couple months ago and you were using some super old camera that you managed to find for like $100 somewhere?
Yes, exactly. Actually, that was a old camcorder as well, but it was that took SD cards. So luckily there was not that whole mini DV tape like watching everything you shoot to upload process, but there was this music documentary I got hired to make, and they had basically no budget. They had to use the entire budget mostly just to get me out there. But luckily the subjects of the documentary were my friends, so I had a motivation to be there and to do it. But what was left of the budget for camera rental was in the hundreds of dollars. And as you know, like film rental gear is just so expensive. And I was trying to explain to them, because they're music people, like we're going to need at least $10,000, to rent the kind of gear that you were talking about. And they were just shocked, because
Right.
$10,000 will record you an album, right? But for film, it's chump change. So
Yes.
yeah, I just told him, I was like, well, if you want to lean into this sort of like gritty look, I can just buy an old camcorder and we can just shoot it all on that. And
That's awesome. I love just going back to like old equipment that has been relegated to the dustbin.
yeah, totally. On eBay, they're in that sweet spot where they're like, they're pretty cheap, they're pretty affordable, but they still capture like, I don't know, all right camera quality, I guess.
When we were really filming and you were editing and stuff like that with me for years, and we'll get into that in a bit, but I was always so frustrated by how fast the gear changes and how much we had to spend like every 2 to 3 years to upgrade everything. Like,
Right.
like before there was 4K, everything needed to be 1080, and then needed to be a certain file size, a certain like color bandwidth, and then next thing you know, everything had to be 4K. And then your storage costs go through the roof as well. Because, I mean, we're shooting for like 10, 14 days without downloading.
Sure.
And then next thing you know, we've got like hundreds of these little fucking cards, all with like little tape on them. A, B, A, C, A, D, all these backups. And then, it just becomes endless.
Endless. Yeah. I would normally get, I feel like, several terabytes from you from the field per episode.
Yeah.
On one of those rugged lacy drives.
Yeah. I think we were doing like between like 2 and 4 TB per episode.
So yeah. And there was the amount, it's funny, like the amount of like memory space that one day of drone footage from you would take up. It takes up the same amount of space as like a week of footage shot on that little camcorder I bought for the other documentary I did. And it's just, it's kind of dizzying, like the amount of hardware you have to have still to just hold all this stuff.
Yeah. I think that's the biggest thing. Like, it's the cost of making content without even thinking about like what to make or producing it or directing it. Like, just the cost of renting equipment and storage and all that shit is insane.
It's really inaccessible. And like, I think that's what's really cool about like the fact that you've still found a path to like create independent work. Despite that, it's just like a testament to the creativity of like the process there, because it's just really inaccessible stuff. And it's not, I don't think that's a good thing, but it's just the way it is. And it's like, you need beyond, just the camera equipment, the hard drives to hold it all. Then you need a computer fast enough to like even play back the footage.
Yeah.
I remember for Expedition Asia, we got like the nicest computer possible basically at that time, and it could hardly run the drone footage like at
really
resolution.
Yeah, because it would jump and skip like that.
Absolutely, yeah. You still needed to like kind of dumb it down and make it lower quality to just like let it run smoothly. It's wild. Yeah, the pace is outrageous.
Yeah, it's true. So what were you shooting back in the day on your little video camera in middle school?
We would okay, so when I say we, me and one of my oldest friends, or my oldest friend, Eric Perini, we just would make, we made sort of a really steady practice out of studying movies and then trying to copy them as best we could. So we're in like the 7th grade, but like we would watch The Godfather, for instance, and then we would dress up like Godfather characters and like make our own version.
Please, God, tell me this footage still exists.
Yeah, there's a lot of it. I'll have to share it with you because it's hilarious. I have this stack of old Memorex burnable DVDs that like hold all these old amazing memory movies, and they were kind of like home videos, and they're kind of not, but they're just goofy, you know. Like we just took it so seriously, and we like really there's some amazing ability when you're younger to like just believe in what you're doing creatively. I like,
That's your first Ted Lasso reference.
yeah, yeah, right. I miss that feeling. I strive for it. I look for it wherever I can, because like, gosh, the ability to like, me and Eric in the 7th grade say like, we're gonna play 12 different characters each. They're all gonna be like meant to be like grandparents or like grown men, and it's gonna be great. This is just like amazing. The optimism there. It's just like it was brilliant. So we would just take every weekend and watch movies and make our own little short films. And this spanned for like 6 years until I went to college, and that's kind of how I like accidentally realized that I love filmmaking. I was just like a hobby, and then it was all I wanted to do. And then one day he and I were like, oh wait, we could go to college for this. We could like find an excuse to just keep doing this forever. And now we're both still doing it. So
That's epic. That's a great story.
yeah,
It's very rare that, two friends grow up doing something and then they keep doing that same creative thing.
exactly. Yeah. I feel really lucky that like sense of purpose and like focus was there. Just, yeah, I feel really lucky to have it, because it's really framed my entire life path so far. And there have been plenty of times where I felt really lost, but I had that, and I've been like, okay, well, I can trust this. I know I love filmmaking. Where's my best opportunity to pursue that? And I'll just sort of follow that compass. And
So what did the middle school soccer coach say when you quit?
I don't think he was that upset. I think it was very much a third string hobby at that point, my soccer career. But I didn't make the varsity team in high school. Got really like heartbroken over that, and I was just like, okay, screw it. Like, I'm abandoning these dreams. I'm too fragile for this.
Did your high school have like an AV center, like where they had like camera equipment and editing equipment?
We had a place called the Career Center, which was this off-campus sort of, or a satellite campus where you could take specialized classes.
A satellite campus? How big was your fucking school?
It was for actually like all the schools in the school system. So like you would go there for classes like film photography. Like I took a film photography class there.
Oh, so they had like a satellite campus that all the big schools shared, and it was like film AV, where
auto tech,
yeah,
like specialized engineering courses. It was really cool because I went to public school. This was not like we didn't have a ton of resources, but that space was where I got my hands on film for the first time. I was in the darkroom for the first time. It really helped me like understand what I was using enlargers and fix and dodging and burning.
And what did the teachers think of your nudes in high school that you were shooting? Yeah.
Keep those secret, right? Yeah, that's why.
Until you leave one in the dark room, and it's just this huge picture of like George Costanza on the couch.
Don't mind that. Yeah. Anything you find in the dark room, just leave it be.
Yeah. Do you remember that Costanza photo shoot with Kramer?
It's all.
Sorry, I've been watching too much Seinfeld on Netflix. It's been great.
I saw a great little snippet of Jason Alexander talking about when he realized that George Costanza was just Larry David.
Yeah.
It's like,
that's one of the best clips ever. He's like, I got this, I got the script, and I was trying to figure out like how to play this, and he was thinking like maybe Woody Allen but then he had to be a little meaner, like, and he was trying to figure out like which Jewish New York kind of like character to try to portray. And then he's like, and then once I figured out that George was Larry David, it clicked perfectly.
There it is. And yeah, honestly, I never really thought of that, but hearing him say it, I was like, that.
Yeah. That show was transformational. I mean, I'm way older than you, but that show hit me like right when I was in high school.
Oh yeah, totally. I grew up on it. My dad loved it. I loved it. Definitely was one of the formative shows.
Yeah. So, so what else were you doing in high school other than filmmaking? I mean, what's it like growing up in North Carolina in general?
Very, honestly, very little. Like, I didn't have that many friends. I didn't like have a girlfriend till I was late in high school. Like, I was in a lot of ways just kind of a loner, and I would hang out with Eric, and that was kind of it. Like, we would just make movies, and I just like didn't have that many friends, and I wasn't cool. I didn't like understand who I was yet, or like maybe I did, but I didn't feel the confidence to just own that yet. And so it was a very singular existence for quite a while. It was like real film nerd, like loser vibes. Maybe not loser vibes, that's harsh, but like we did not do much, but like
you guys were in your own little world.
We were, yeah. And like we just made sure that we busied ourselves and like did not really have time to like think about if there was anything else to do. But then our ambitions got bigger within video and film work, and so we would start to be forced to reach out to others and be like, would you like to be in our movie? And then all of a sudden we're like those kids making movies on the weekends, and we kind of accidentally created a reputation about ourselves as like the film kids, because there weren't really people interested in making movies that we knew other than us. So then we'd just have like some like popular kids reaching out to us for like, hey, let's make this like video or whatever. And we kind of accidentally found ourselves in like a much more popular echelon of high schoolers by the end of our time in high school because of this, and even shot this like feature-length Batman movie for this kid.
Oh my God, you gotta start sharing some of this stuff with me.
It was so Gunnar Anderson, shout out Gunnar. He's here in LA now. He's the One Peck Wonder. He is a personal trainer who has something called Poland syndrome, where he has one fully grown pectoral muscle and one that just doesn't grow. So he's this jacked guy with one pec, and it's like he's carved out this amazing space for himself online. Regardless, I knew this guy back in high school, and he absolutely loved Batman and wanted to be Batman, and was completely unashamed of it too, which I think is like the most special part. He was just like owned it, and
there's a whole group of those people that go to Comic-Con every year.
Yeah,
he would have been first in line.
Yeah, I think so. He had so much Batman swag. Like, I'd never seen so much Batman suits and fits and masks and action figures and comics in my life.
I definitely had a Batman lunchbox at one stage, but definitely not high school.
Was it? Yeah, that would have been, was that like Keaton Batman?
No, I think this would have been like the original Batman TV show before Michael Keaton took it to the big screen. I think it was like, remember they had the old like action TV show on? It was on like every day at like 4 p.m. Like, you come home from school and Batman would be on. And I can't remember the actors in it, but it was all shot in like the 70s or the 60s. And it was like, pow, smack. It was like, yeah, it was the best.
So he definitely had that like on VHS too or something, right? He had like anything Batman, he had it, he knew about it. And he had this comic that he wanted to adapt to. It was this 55-page comic that he wanted to turn into a movie starring him as Batman. And he approached me in the hallway in my junior year of high school. He was a senior. And he was like, Zach. I was like, hi. And he was like, you make movies, right? And I was like, yeah. And he pitched me this thing. He was like, I'll pay you $300 to make this Batman.
$300?
55-page script.
Yeah.
And I was like, at that time, I was like, I'd never been offered any money to do anything film or video related. So I was over the moon. Absolutely said yes right away. He did the same thing with Eric. He approached Eric about making the movie too. So Eric and I sort of co-directed this ridiculous Batman feature film starring exclusively high school kids. And Gunnar was well connected enough, wealthy enough, all of the above to really recruit a lot of our like high school peers. A lot of the like cool kids, so to speak, became a part of this movie, and it turned into this thing that we just did every weekend for something like 3 months straight. And by the time we were done shooting about it, there were enough kids in our community who had like heard about it or been involved in it, that there was a big push to like have a showing of it, a premiere. And I don't know how Gunnar did this, but he organized in high school the Winston-Salem like independent theater screened it, and it sold out. And it was a really goofy, beautiful, silly.
Did you guys have sell tickets and like have popcorn and the whole thing?
Oh yeah, the whole thing. Yeah, it was just a very, very much like a working theater that agreed to show this one night, and they were turning high schoolers away, even though, I mean, the worst movie ever made in the best way.
Yeah,
but terrible work. I love it.
It's great. It's so good. You could collaborate with your friends at that age, right?
Yeah.
Like that's how Kevin Smith got started. That's how like Christopher Nolan got started. Like just making like, and this was when they were in film school. You were even before film school.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah. I don't know if I could drive yet. We were really quite young.
What about the nature in North Carolina? It's supposed to be spectacular, isn't it?
It is, yeah. There's, the Outer Banks on the coast, which are these barrier islands. The coast of North Carolina is very pretty as well, the actual coast. In the Piedmont where I am, it's a lot of like farmland, a lot of tobacco fields, very flat. And then you get a little west and you get into the Blue Ridge Mountains, which is spectacular. Yeah. Nature. A lot of folks go to Western North Carolina for to see the leaves change in autumn. A lot of people do
the famous foliage.
Oh yeah. Black bears everywhere. Really common part of living in Western North Carolina is just seeing families of bears wandering around all the time. You see a lot of motorcyclists love to drive the Blue Ridge Parkway, sort of goes through the mountains up there.
The Appalachian Trail goes through the Blue Ridge Mountains in North Carolina, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you'll see, I used to live in Asheville, North Carolina, and you would see folks stop off the trail and grab beer, a bite, whatever in town for hopping back on the trail, because it basically runs right through town, kind of.
Crazy.
Yeah. That's a whole culture that seems really, really intense. Like,
yeah, doing those like the Pacific Crest Trail or the Appalachian Trail, those like 2,000 or 3,000 mile walks that take like months on end. That's a bit too much for me.
It seems like the Pacific Crest Trail would be a lot more scenic and like a lot more space. From what I've heard about the Appalachian Trail, I think it's like a tunnel of trees most of the time. And you get a couple big lookouts, but yeah, it's so foresty.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it is like people looking for like purpose or community, because you end up, it's not this solitude experience. It's, I think, very much like you end up getting sort of adopted by a trail group. They give you a trail name. It's like this whole kind of hippie thing.
Sounds pretty wild though.
Yeah. I'm sure it's like, I know one guy, Tim, who did the trail, and
Pacific or the Appalachian?
Appalachian.
Yeah.
I don't know anyone who's done the PC.
The logistics of it just seem to. Remember that Reese Witherspoon was in a movie? Wild, yeah, where she did the Pacific Crest Trail because she was like drug addicted and had a bad relationship or something. She came out and used the trail to like clean herself up. It was a beautiful movie actually. But the logistics of like sending food to yourself months in advance just seems like a lot to handle.
Can you? I can't imagine after like 2 months of like freeze-dried food, just like another.
Even like after 10 days, like when we were filming, like out in the wild, like just it does become a lot. And it doesn't work well on your digestive system. After like 10 days, it starts to really get clogged up.
So many clip bars. So many clip bars. Do you have like a go-to sort of menu on the trail after all that time?
Well, the good thing is that Jesse, who was our camera operator for almost all of our shoots over the years, he managed all of our food. Okay. So I just gave him a budget, and he would just go to whatever, mountain equipment shop. There's a bunch, and he would stock up on like Cliff Bars and the food, and we would have breakfast. And then, so what we would do is, like, for example, if we're walking through the desert, right, we got 150 kilometers, maybe it's going to take 10 days. So we would get 30 breakfasts and 30 dinners, 3 a day for each of us, myself, Chad, and Jesse. And then we would have breakfast in the morning, coffee, and then pack up and then walk all day. And when we were walking all day, the guides would have some bread and stuff like that. We would have a few Cliff Bars, and then we would get to camp, settle, unpack, have a hot dinner, and then kind of go to bed. So we were kind of living just on 2 meals a day.
Is it like, would you come off those trails having lost some weight? Were you like calorie counting or anything like that?
So you didn't have to calorie count. Like you were coming out like 10, 15 pounds under every single time. It was amazing. Like for years, I didn't have to like exercise or watch my diet. Like, cause we were filming, like we're basically filming 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, doing these extreme treks for like 5 years. And yeah, it was unbelievable for the waistline.
Yeah, sure. For the heart.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It was nice. But you know what I miss the most is sleeping in nature, like sleeping in a tent.
Yeah.
And going to bed at like, when it gets dark at 6:30 p.m. or 5:30 p.m., just going to bed like a half an hour after it's dark, and then waking up with sunrise. Like just sleeping with the natural rhythm of the earth is so much more healthy than just being surrounded by electricity and artificial light and your fucking phone.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was only a satellite phone out there, right?
Satellite phone, and I had one of those little GPS SMS messaging things.
Sure.
Which I found way more useful than the satellite phone, because then you could SMS text message people and just say like, hey, day 1, all good, day 2, fine, still alive. Yeah. But and then the satellite phone, if you have to do any like super heavy lifting.
Did you have any close calls out there?
On Expedition Asia, which you did the post-production supervision and the editing and everything, and coloring and on Expedition Asia, don't think so. I think the closest call we ever had was Mount Elbrus, which was Extreme Treks for BBC. Yeah, we got caught in a snowstorm at about 5,500 meters, which is like almost about 16,000 feet. And but what happened was we got caught in the snowstorm, but then we got caught in the cloud. And it was an electrical storm, so there was lightning in the cloud, and we were in the cloud, and we were, you got crampons, you've got an ice axe, you're surrounded by metal, right? You've got you've got your harness on, you're connected to other people by rope, and then you start to feel like the static energy in your hair starts coming out, and you're just like, and then people are like, drop your ice axes, like run, like, and we were just dropped everything, took off our harnesses, and we're just like running back down the mountain. There's a really funny story about that, actually. I don't know if I can tell it here. but one of the crew members, I won't tell who, that was like a life-changing experience for him.
Sure.
And then he was really kind of shaken up by that. And then he decided to like propose to his girlfriend or something like that, and like make big changes in his life after that.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's what I think I remember reading somewhere that like anytime your hair starts to go up like that, it's really good sign there's about to be a lightning strike. Like that's a wild.
That was the scariest, because the problem was we were going up one side of Elbrus. We were going up the west side. We'd just come over the glacier with all the crevasses, for anyone out there who's watched the episode. And then we were going up one side, and it was actually just an acclimatization day. We just wanted to get up above 5,000 meters and then go back down to camp. But as we're going up, when you're going up the mountain, you can't see what's on that side. You can only see what's behind you. So we were going up, and every now and then we were like, okay, blue skies still. Every half hour, yeah. No, we're still okay, yeah. Weather looks good. But the storm came from the other side. Couldn't see it coming. So there we are, nothing but blue sky behind us. And then within like 10 minutes, we're in this cloud, and it's tough to move. You got to watch where you put your feet. You're roped into other guys. You've got ice axes. You've got crampons. You can't run, right? Like it's So yeah, it was quite terrifying. But you know, you just kind of you drop all your stuff that's metal and you work your way down slowly and stay calm, and then get back to camp, have a whiskey because you're still alive, and contemplate, you know, going back up tomorrow. But yeah, it did hit one of our crew member pretty hard.
Yeah, I would say you were proper acclimatized after that.
Yeah, definitely.
All conditions.
So, okay. And how about graduating high school? And how did you choose to go to film school? Which ones did you apply to, and which one did you end up going to?
Sure. Eric and I decided together that I think it's funny to think back on like little moments that end up really defining your life. I remember distinctly we just typed in best film schools to Google when we realized.
You had the internet in high school?
Yeah, or this middle school. Yeah, right. It was the one shared desktop computer of the family, right? We realized, I think, that there was such a thing as film school, and we said, oh well, we want to do that. We were in like the 7th grade at this time, and typed in like best. NYU was at the top, and we decided right then and there, we were like, all right, we're gonna go to NYU, and I ended up applying to NYU, Emerson College, and Loyola Marymount, which is also out here in LA, and went to NYU, got in and went, and both Eric and I went to NYU, and it's just so funny that we kind of just decided we would do this thing so young and just did it, and yeah.
How aware were you when you were like in high school or in middle school, like of Scorsese, of Spike Lee going to NYU, teaching at NYU, right? Of guys like, the name just escaped me, but of all the actors that have also gone through NYU and how they have like built out their whole network. Like, were you aware of any of that before you decided to try to go to film school?
Yeah.
Because going to film school is a big deal. Like, it's very... I was chatting with someone about this the other day. Sorry to interrupt you, but it's like going to film school is very singular.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, I'm going to learn how to make film, you know, as a writer, as a director, as a camera operator, lighting, script. Like, you're going to learn every facet of how to create stories, tell stories. And once you're done, you can't go and be a history major, or you can't, you know, learn about political philosophy or international relations. Like, you're in film, this is it. Like, this is your singular purpose, your singular vehicle for the rest of your existence. That's a big step for like someone who's like 16, 17, 18 to make.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It was a huge commitment to make, a huge singular commitment to make. And
did your parents trust you to make that decision?
They did. I really appreciate them supporting me going there to NYU, because it's so far from North Carolina, and it's so expensive for them. Like, that was just a huge amount of support I had from them.
Living in New York City, pricey.
Oh yeah. Living in New York City and not working, even pricier.
Yeah.
And I think I guess I can't say I was aware of the like implications of having such a singular degree when I was 18 years old, but I knew I had a very one-track mind about what I wanted to do in life anyway. Film was all I wanted to do at that point. And, you know, when you're 18, you're like, all right, I'm finally done with high school, finally done with grade school. I got it all figured out now. It was, I was very confident in that feeling. And I guess I just, feel really lucky that I felt so sure, because it really is an intense decision to make. Like,
sure.
NYU is technically a liberal arts school, so you split your credits down the middle between film and then like general education credits. But the moment you get to Tisch at NYU, the arts school, they tell you indirectly, they're like, you don't really have to give a shit about this gen ed. It's like, you're here for film, this is what you're doing. And I that's the approach I took. I got like C's and D's and all my gen eds, and I just focused on film. And would hardly show up for my gen eds. And I mean, in terms of the alumni, I think that's not why I wanted to go to NYU. I think I wanted to go just because like the internet seemed to think it was amazing there, which is so silly now to think back on. But it was true. It was like I think film school as an education outlet is kind of goofy. Like I think you could really easily spend that money just making a movie for yourself and probably learn as much about filmmaking that way. But I feel like what I paid for there at NYU was the network and was the community there, because it paid dividends for like so long. And I did get to like sit in on, the Coen brothers would like come and like speak at a seminar, or we'd get preview screenings of amazing films coming out. A lot of alumni, of course, from NYU are some of like the biggest shakers in history, and there was just like this merry-go-round of folks coming by just to speak to us, like, and I think it just made it all feel really accessible to me, and it just like made me feel like, okay, like it's up to me now. Like I'm in a space where I have all the tools to make this happen for myself and to like grow as a filmmaker, and no more time for excuses. Like, because in high school we're very much just bemoaning the fact that we're in the Southeast, this very conservative place. No one really cares about filmmaking the way they care about other things, like, I don't know, football, for instance. So now all of a sudden we're in this place where it's all anyone's doing, and it was just great to like light a fire under my ass. All of a sudden I wasn't the only filmmaker at my high school. I was like amongst 1,000 other filmmakers who wanted it just as bad as I did, and there was like a great competitive sort of nature to that program.
So how did the North Carolina confidence hold going into New York City?
Well, actually, no, I take that back.
Did you have a screening of Batman in Manhattan, in Gotham?
I was so embarrassed then of Batman. It was really funny. I shouldn't have been, but like I think a bigger part of the reason I was embarrassed is because I'm also acting a little bit in Batman as like a senator, and I was just like, oh, come on, like it's crazy. But it held up in a way because Eric and I, just the fact that we knew from middle school on that we wanted to do this, it gave us a lot of space to teach ourselves about the technical side of filmmaking before we got to college. And so when we got there, Eric and I at that point had made 50 movies, and they were silly movies, but they taught us the whole process of like, this is how you frame a shot, this is how you write a script, and this is what it looks like to write something and for it to work. This is what it feels like to write something, have it fail miserably. And we taught ourselves how to do video editing before we got to college. We taught ourselves how to use DSLRs before we got to college. So getting to college, especially freshman year, there were a lot of classes that were just teaching all those things we had already taught ourselves. So I gotta unfortunately admit, I was like really cocky and douchey about all of that knowledge, because I was like, they were like, we're going to teach you how to use a DSLR. And I was like, I literally own one of these, like, which is so silly and like privileged to say, but I did. I knew how to do all the stuff they wanted to teach us freshman year. And I got a real head about me, and I started sort of subverting all of our assignments. They'd have us make a short film. Everyone would make like serious project. I would make something like super goofy just because I was kind of bored with the idea that I was supposed to learn this camera I already had or something like that. And I think that bit me in the ass later on, because I think that confidence permeated into my later years of college, where you do start to get into material that you just don't know. Like, I'd seen Coppola movies, I had seen the Scorsese movies, I had seen the Coen brother movies. I had not seen Bertolucci, I had not seen Tarkovsky. There was like this whole other world of like really, really sort of like high art, like big ideas. Experimental filmmaking was new to me, all this stuff. And I think, yeah, I sort of walked into those spaces thinking, I'll probably just like know how to do all this too. And then it was like a rude awakening when I started to see people around me who maybe came into school with knowing less start to like get cooler opportunities than me and like get asked to do bigger and better things. And after that wake up call, which was probably like somewhere in sophomore year, I doubled down. I was like, I need to decide what I want to do in this space. It became editing, and I was friends with a lot of upperclassmen, and I got lucky. They asked me to edit a lot of their movies, and yeah, that sort of, I'm still in post-production now. It's like, I remember that first film that I agreed to edit, never would have thought that would have brought me into like 10 years of post-production work.
Right. How crazy is that at like 18, 19 to be like, I'm going to be a film editor?
Yeah, right. Yeah. New York, I think it forces you to answer the question.
Well, it's so expensive. Like you can't just, I mean, unless you're a trust fund kid, you can't just sit around and kind of like do nothing and sip coffee at cafes and pontificate about storytelling.
Yeah.
You actually have to fucking make stuff. So you got to decide what your role is and then get into it, right?
Totally.
There's no wasting time. No. It's a pressure cooker.
It is, yeah. And it's only the strongest are going to survive kind of thing. Because, yeah, if you even have a little bit of doubt up there in New York, it's like you look around, you're like, all these people seem to know exactly what they're doing. So, like,
and the truth is, no one knows what anyone's doing. They're just all just puffing their chest and keeping their back straight, waiting for everyone else to make mistakes first.
Yeah, there's and these are lessons I still find myself like learning all the time. It's such being a filmmaker in LA is such a trip, right? Because it's all of a sudden you are, at least for me, in North Carolina, you're into art, you're kind of like you're not in the majority, and there's a special feeling that comes with that. And coming out here, no one wants to hear that you're a filmmaker. They're like, okay, yeah. So it's like literally dime a dozen, probably no higher concentration of filmmakers in the country, and it's a weird feeling to just be like, yeah, I'm not special at all. It's probably a good feeling to get used to, but
yeah. That's definitely exactly how everyone feels in LA, I think.
Yeah.
Competing with the whole city all the time, every day.
Every day.
Yeah.
Watching it come out of the pandemic, like coming out of the writer's strike, it's like, oh, it's just, yeah. There was a while there where I think I was like, oh, everyone's kind of in the same boat here. It's like everyone's kind of down in the dumps about filmmaking for a while there, but then but now things are starting to feel back to normal. It's back to that hustle and grind, and not feeling special. But just good.
Until we get our next Black Swan event coming soon, no doubt, probably. So okay, so what was it like being in New York City at like 18 years old? Like that's got to be just like, were you just off your head? Were you out every night?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, spoiled beyond belief. Like my freshman year dorm was on 5th Avenue and 10th Street. So it was just like unbelievable. I had no appreciation for what it was that I was getting exposed to, for the spaces the space I was taking up there. I was just like, yeah, of course I live on. It was absurd, but definitely everyone gets a fake ID, and even if you don't, like, it's just so easy to drink underage in New York. And the NYU sort of community just knows all the bars that will serve you underage, and we made a habit of going out every single night. I was so blackout drunk so many nights, and I just like, I remember being so sick so often from all the drinking, but that was the time to do it.
Well, you can't do that anymore. I mean, we're getting old.
Yeah, I had 3 drinks the other night and I threw up. I was just like, I'm ruined.
Oh man, I'll edit that bit out. No one needs to.
Yeah.
No one needs to know you've turned into a lightweight.
Yeah,
we got McAllen for later.
Exactly. Yeah, it was mayhem, and it was basically just partying and filming, and a lot of like mixing of the two.
Yeah. I remember when I was in college, like I was playing basketball and also some rugby, and I just drink a ton. Like,
Yeah.
and I just worked like right through it.
Right.
There was no problem at all. And then now it's, 2 days later, you're still feeling shaken.
Easily.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's messed up.
You know what? I had a podcast like 2 weeks ago with this guy David, and he's the Glenfiddich ambassador for the United States.
Whoa.
So he does a lot of events and he educates people about whiskey, and I love whiskey. So he came and we had like a 2.5 hour chat. We drank quite a bit actually,
Right.
and it was great. And we both agreed like the setting of where you're drinking whiskey is the most important thing about whiskey.
Sure.
Like he said, like the people you're with. If you're surrounded by nature, if it's cold outside, it's like the way the Scots would have wanted you to drink their whiskey, basically. And I just remember all those like beautiful nights trekking or climbing, sitting on the edge of a mountain or being out in the middle of the desert, sipping on my flasks, with the boys, and just how like perfect a drink it was for those perfect moments. And yeah, you can't drink that much when you're out there anyways, but it was nice just to have a sip and then go to bed.
Go to bed. Yeah. Would you bring a bottle?
No. So what we did is, and because you weren't part of the field team, I don't think I gave you a flask, or did I?
I got an expedition.
I sent you an Expedition Asia flask. That's good.
Yeah.
But I would get for every time we would do a season, I would get the guys that were traveling with me, basically Chad and Jesse, and sometimes Daniel, a flask.
Sure.
So it would say their name on it, and then it would say like the name of the show, like Extreme Treks, and then which season it was. And then we would get a bottle before we head out on the expedition or the climb or whatever, and we would fill up all the flasks. But then by like season 3 or 4, you've got 3 or 4 flasks, 5 or 6 flasks. So then you're filling up all of them and bringing them all out. And we basically figured out that like obviously high altitude mountaineering, very dangerous, because dehydration and altitude sickness are a real problem. So we wouldn't drink it all on those trips. And acclimatization is such a problem as well. But like if we were in like Papua New Guinea in the jungle and we were like trekking all day, or if we were in like the Badain Jarain Desert in Inner Mongolia, or on the border with Mongolia and China, and like, having a drink at sunset, no problem, right? So,
Sure.
So that was kind of how we justified it. But yeah, those were some beautiful nights because we would set up all 3 cameras to shoot time lapses of sunsets.
Sure.
And I remember so many times we'd have 3 cameras going for the sunset time lapses, all on different things. And then we'd have 2 drones up. Chad would be flying one, Jesse would be flying one. And I'd just be sitting in the middle between them, watching both their screens on what they were filming with the drone, having all 3 cameras up, and then we'd all just be sipping whiskey. And that's how like the last 30 minutes of every day would be.
Oh, that's a really nice ritual. Yeah. Yeah. Being out, that just sounds great. Yeah. Exactly. You feel like you've really earned it, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, after walking like 15, 20 kilometers, like what's that, like 10, 15 miles in one day, like to settle down, take off your shoes, watch it.
Y'all aren't just walking either. Y'all are wrecking. Like the desert, the jungle, it's not a cakewalk.
Yeah. Well, you've seen it all, haven't you?
Oh.
So let's get into this. So when did I meet you and how?
I think we met in 2014 at a hotel on Central Park. I think my uncle used to have a brewery in Shanghai, and I think my name came up in passing while you met him or something like that.
So your uncle worked for Miramax.
Okay, tell me. A lot of what my uncle has done in China.
So and I can't remember his name for the life of me. I'm sorry. Rob, that's it. So Rob messaged me on like LinkedIn, I think, in 2014, and said, hey, I was like MGM or Miramax or something, and he was like in film distribution.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And then he's like, I'm coming to Shanghai. I want to meet people doing entertainment. And by this stage, I'd done Tough Rides China, Tough Rides India, was in pre-production for Brazil. I had done my first season of Extreme Treks. So the stuff was on TV basically.
Yeah.
So he was, so he wanted to meet me. So I met him for coffee. And of course, Miramax, MGM, a bit different there. But anyways, he was looking for like real film partners and stuff like that. And of course, I was just making like small television shows. So we didn't really hit it off. But then he said that his nephew was at NYU and that I should, look you up next time I'm in New York. And that's what I did.
I think we should exchange some emails. I was like kind of in disbelief because I was still in school, and I was like, wait, someone like wants to talk to me about filmmaking, like in a professional way. Like I was so thrilled because
semi-professional.
we make it work.
Yeah.
I mean, I was reaching the end of my NYU stint, and I was realizing like, oh, I'm not gonna make some short film that like turns me into Martin Scorsese at 22. Like I'm gonna actually need to. What the fuck am I gonna do? And I grew up on outdoor content on the Discovery Channel stuff. Like Bear Grylls was my favorite thing to watch ever for the longest time.
I loved Bear too. Yeah, the early stuff,
right? They do a good job of making you think it's real. It's like, and I just like, I speaking of like programming that Eric and I would try to copy, I would on my own try to make my own sort of spoof Bear Grylls episodes in my backyard. I'd use my dog as like a wild animal, like sort of prop, stuff like that. So it was already in my bones, this like, I loved hiking and camping. It was already there, and the idea of like meshing these two things was amazing. And I think you came through New York. I remember meeting you at Central Park for maybe an hour or so, and we talked about how we might be able to collaborate at some point. And then I came out here to LA for an internship program for my last semester of school, and you sent me some content to cut for social media, I believe, and that sort of began our long. We had maybe like 1 year of like behind the scenes sort of collaboration. I was cutting some stuff for YouTube, and just kind of grew from there into full-fledged television episodes, right?
Yeah. And this might be the 10-year anniversary of our working relationship. Yeah.
Yeah, you're like one of my oldest buds now, yeah.
So I remember that. So in 2014, I was living in New York. I lived in New York September, October, November, December.
Okay.
So I rented a apartment there, I remember. And yeah, you came to the apartment, and we walked through Central Park. And actually, we sat down on the same rock. I think we had some coffees, right? We sat down on the same rock where Colin and I sat in 2010 and decided to do like Tough Rides China.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so we sat there, and you and I were chatting about, how to maybe find some way to collaborate together. And then I think the first job we had together was going through all of the old footage of Tough Rides China and just picking out like little clips, behind the scenes, funny stuff.
Yeah.
And and throwing that up for social media. And that was a blast.
It was so fun to like comb through all that stuff. It was sort of, without me realizing it, setting me up to just know your content so well in the future. But at that point, I was just in awe. Like Tough Rides China, probably some of the most like run and gun filmmaking I've seen from you, and it's just like, it was amazing to watch. Like at that point, China was still this like really mysterious place that was like very much felt like on the rise from the gaze of the Western world. And you'd hear about China all the time, but you'd hear about like how filmmaking in China was becoming like a thing, but there was no sort of like bridge to that world, for me at least, that I had found. And then all of a sudden I'm seeing this amazing like on the ground footage of y'all like dodging border patrols, like doing like sleeping in all these odd places in the middle of absolutely nowhere. I was just like amazed pouring over that footage. Like
I forgot about dodging the border patrol on the border with Mongolia and Inner Mongolia. Yeah, when Chad got caught up in the hills. Yeah, that was yeah.
Y'all had to sort of like regroup with him at some point, I think.
Yeah. We had him on a walkie-talkie. Remember that? We were like, Chad, don't move. They're coming back. Yeah, because you know what? Like they said we could take this road. So for those people who might not know, like there's a road that goes along the border with China and Mongolia, and it's basically the border road. And we got into this town at like 4 p.m. at night, and it was going to be dark in like an hour and a half at 5:36. So the police who control this road, because it's a border road and you need a special permit to take it. We had the permit. They were like, "Oh, you don't want to do this road tonight because you're not gonna make it to the other side, to the safe side. before it gets dark, and you don't want to be on the road when it gets dark because it was gravel, it wasn't paved, right?
Okay.
So and yeah, it's much better to be on a dirt road, during the daytime, so you can see the potholes and stuff. So they said, look, just stay here tonight, then tomorrow we'll let you take the road. So we slept, and then the next morning we woke up, and the guys, the military, border police, they stood by their word, and they said, okay, guys, thanks for spending the night. Yeah, it's 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. Okay, go. Be safe. Don't stop. You're not supposed to stop on the road because you're literally on the border with Mongolia. So just keep going. Don't stop and take pictures. This is a military zone. And we're like, yeah, no problem. And then like a couple hours into the journey, like we get stopped by this other group of military police, and they tell us that the road is closed to turn around, or the road's closed to foreigners to turn around. And we're like, we can't turn around. Your guys back there told us we could go through, and for us to do like a whole loop back to where we came and then go around and reconnect with our route. It was like a 3-day detour. And then, so then we ended up we kept going, and then they followed us, and then Chad was filming, and then we had to hide Chad, and then we had to keep going. And then, it ended up being like a whole thing, but it was a good little day of filming.
Yeah. It was, I forget, y'all had a producer at that point, I think, who spoke Mandarin. It seemed like he was like pulling some fast ones on him. I just loved reliving y'all's days in that.
Well, that was my friend Ted. So the funny thing is like, so when you say like China wasn't very accessible at that time, for me it was, right?
Sure.
So from 2001 or from 2002 to like 2012, I wrote and did photography all about China, and with the New York Times and whatever. So I knew China everywhere, and felt super comfortable going anywhere. And that's why making that first show, Tough Rides China, was so easy in some ways, because I felt super comfortable traveling around the country, and I knew some Chinese. But my friend Ted was with us on that Mongolia part, and his Chinese was excellent. And he was, and some of the border military kids that were out there, their Mandarin wasn't very good. Like a lot of them would be from small countryside villages or from parts of China, where the Mandarin wasn't great.
Okay.
But my friend Ted, he was a big white guy like me, and he spoke perfect, fluent Beijing Mandarin, like bang, bang, bang. So his accent was just clean and crisp, and sometimes the kids didn't pick it up, and he could talk circles in Chinese around these military places. And he was just fucking with them because he was like, but that guy back there said we could go, and his name was like Mr. Jew, and Mr. Jew's mom brought him breakfast today, and like he was just throwing in all this stuff that was totally unnecessary just to like mess with them, and it was beautiful.
Yeah, that was so cool to see. It felt so magical and just out there. And now, of course, we're just inundated with
not good content, though.
No, definitely nothing about like the countryside, the natural beauty, nothing like that.
No.
And gosh, like once you got up to like the Uyghur areas and the like, some of those like southern like super dense jungle areas, it was just the most amazing footage I'd ever seen.
And shot in the worst. I mean, like we did okay, but we had one camera.
Sure.
And it was an HD camera, so this was like before 4K. I just remember how much difficulty we had, like keeping the batteries charged, keeping the batteries warm. Like this was just as GoPro technology was coming out. I remember doing that trip around China, Tough Rides China. Like today I was driving on Santa Monica Boulevard, and this guy comes up on this nice Ducati right next to me, because in California you can lane split, right? Guy comes right up next to me, and he's got his phone with his GPS, Google Maps, I guess, Apple Maps. He's got his phone on his motorcycle dashboard, and he's just following the directions, right? But when we did Tough Rides China, Google Maps didn't exist. And Garmin didn't have a map of China, because the Chinese government wouldn't let them map China, because they thought that was a security threat. So we did Tough Rides China by using a book map. So not like a folded map, but like a book, and each page was like a province or a part of a province, and you would see which highways. But China was changing so much. Sometimes you would get to like a gas station or a truck stop, and you'd be like, oh, does this road go here? And they'd be like, no, but there's a new road that goes there, and it's faster. And then like, oh my God, do we trust this guy at the gas station and take the road that's going to save us 2 hours, but then maybe we have to come back because he's wrong, because he hasn't taken the whole road? Maybe he's only taken like a little bit. or do we just stay on the main road and do, and you know, we had to make these decisions on a daily basis because we just had no idea what the fuck was going on out there.
Yeah. Did you find that you could trust like word of mouth directions like
You
that?
can't trust anyone.
Yeah.
No one knows what's going on, and even in the, you know, like even here, like no one knows anything.
Everyone's got an opinion, but they don't really know.
People genuinely want to be like helpful, but it's not helpful most of the time.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm sure there's book maps too where you know, hardly legible. Like once Ted departed, how were y'all getting around after that?
So Ted was with us as our kind of like driver. So we had a support vehicle with all of our camera equipment and Chad, the director of photography, and all the cameras, batteries, everything, extra motorcycle equipment as well, all in the support vehicle. And Ted was with us for the first 2 weeks. He was my best friend. We taught English in Shanghai together.
Yeah.
Then I got into journalism and things like that, and he got into what's the best way to do it? He got into consulting, I guess. But he took off, 2 weeks to do this trip with us. So he was our fixer and our driver for the first 2 weeks. And then when he had to go back to work, he flew back, and then our support vehicle was picked up then by another guy, Abdul, who was my friend from Xinjiang, right? And then Abdul was with us for the rest of the trip. And that's how we got around, because we always needed to have a driver, and we always needed to have someone who spoke better Chinese than me, because we did get into trouble from time to time. And, and there were situations where we had accidents and had to fix the bike or things like that. So we needed to be able to be like, where can we get our tires replaced? Where can we get, it's just stuff I couldn't manage. Oil changes.
Sure.
Yeah.
I remember if y'all had to get a part shipped to you. And I remember the footage of the truck getting loaded onto, or the bikes getting loaded onto a truck, which then took y'all to a town, which was swarmed by the townspeople, because gosh, they'd never probably seen like tall white guys or these BMW bikes before, and it was just amazing to watch y'all navigate the chaos of it all.
Well, first of all, I'm a terrible motorcycle rider. So I burned out my clutch.
Right.
And the way you burn out a clutch is that you ride the clutch. And good motorcycle riders don't ride the clutch. Like weak-ass motorcycle riders ride the clutch because we're too busy like trying to figure out which gear we should be in, instead of just like being decisive and being like, no, we're in third, so let's just leave it, right? And then you pop the clutch and you're in third. But I was always going back and forth, and I was always on my clutch. Anyways, when you're riding off-road, you're on the clutch way more than normal, because a lot of the times when you're riding off-road, you're trying to keep the clutch engaged just enough so that you can kind of push through sand and still kind of maintain control of the bike. Because if you let the clutch go and you just hit the gas, you can lose control of the bike. So you end up like kind of keeping the clutch engaged a little bit. Anyways, that's what my off-road instructor taught me. But I wasn't doing it right, because my brother did not burn out his clutch, and I did in the sand in Tibet. Yeah, and then we had to put the bike on the truck, and then I was riding in the back with the truck. And then we got to this village, and they hadn't seen white people really. And then these two F800 GS motorcycles were, in these small Tibetan villages, all they have is like little like 125cc bikes. And then the 125cc bikes have clutches like this, and our clutches were like that.
Right.
So they were like, no, we don't have this spare part. This is fucking ridiculous. But then at this stage, China didn't have any spare parts for BMW motorcycles, because they had just started allowing, the same year, they had just started allowing like Harley and BMW to actually sell bikes in China. And the dealers were so focused on selling the bikes that they didn't really think about the aftermarket. So the aftermarket is like where all the dealerships make the money, in the repair and maintenance. Sure. But there were no spare parts. So when I blew out my clutch, I called, my guy in Shanghai, and I'm like, hey, like, send me a clutch. And he's like, we don't have a clutch. And I was like, well, fucking call someone in Germany and get them to send one to Tibet. And they're like, no, that'll take like a month.
Right.
Do you remember the story?
I do. I don't exactly remember how y'all ended up getting it, but I remember the footage of like y'all just sort of posted up, waiting, and being like, y'all still had like a third of the trip left at this point. It would have been an absolute disaster to abandon ship, but wasn't it like the shipping process alone was like the most convoluted?
So we had a guy following our journey on Facebook, because this was where the journey was followed back in the day, before Instagram.
Sure.
we had someone following, and he was a German guy living in southern China, and he ran a manufacturing. He made the rubber cleats for football shoes, and we visited his factory on the way out. Yeah, super nice guy. And so he bought us the clutch, got his friend who was a Lufthansa pilot to fly it from Munich to Hong Kong. He had a friend in Hong Kong illegally take it across the border into mainland China. And then we flew him from Shenzhen to Lhasa, and then got him a driver to bring it out to us. And then I had to put Colin and I, we had to put the clutch back in ourselves, but we put it in backwards, and then all the oil leaked out, and then we had to take it out, put it in again the right way, and then we finally had it sealed because we didn't know how to fix the bikes.
Right. And what are you using, manuals at this point to fix it? Like, how did you even?
There's a website called like AV Rider, like Adventure Rider, advrider.com or something like this. And this was a forum. And again, this was like, YouTube wasn't very developed at this stage, right? Like at this, if this was in 2024, you just type into YouTube, like how to fix a BMW F800 GS clutch, right?
Sure.
But back in like 2010, YouTube wasn't that advanced. It was still mostly just cat videos.
Yeah.
So we had to go onto this ADV Rider, and there was actually someone who did detail by detail our bike and how to repair a clutch. And actually, I wrote to that guy afterwards. I can't remember who it was now, but I wrote to him saying like, you saved our entire production because I had to do this like major repair.
Yeah.
In this small Tibetan village, thanks to your notes. So that ended up being kind of cool.
That's so. Yeah, that was. I mean, there's some chaos there that like, I think it's good that you honed in the process of Tough Rides by the time you got to Brazil, big time. Like, just the difference in planning and production was like, was huge, right? But like, there is some real magic in the capturing all the chaos and like the stuff you can't anticipate the first time you do it. It was just, I love that footage just for the real raw.
The two things I learned about Tough Rides China, the first trip we did, right? Number one, like you can't control anything. So don't even waste mental energy thinking you can.
Sure.
Like it's earth-shattering how little you can actually control. So just go out and try not to fall off your motorcycle every day.
Yeah.
And try to stop enough times so that Chad can get some shots of you riding past him, this was before drones, right?
Sure.
So we literally had to stop. The car would go up ahead. We would stop at a gas station. We'd fill up the car would go out ahead, with Chad, and then he would find a place, put down the tripod, set up the camera, and then we would finish our, gas, and then we wouldn't know where he is. And then we would just get on the road, and then we would, he would find a place with a nice background and stuff like that, and then he would shoot, and then we would just blow past them, and that would be like one riding shot for the day. And we were always trying to do like 4 or 5 riding shots, plus we had some cameras on. And then, some days we would have like events, like we would be visiting a monastery or visiting something or meeting someone interesting. But most days it was just riding, right? So that was kind of how we got through the riding. So the first thing I learned about Tough Rides China was like, you can't control anything. And the second thing was how nice it was to have my brother.
Yeah, sure.
Because when the production team is in the car, they've got air conditioning, they've got the windows closed, they're listening to Taylor Swift or
right,
whoever in 2010 was the version of Taylor. Like they're just listening to the radio, they got their DVD in, whatever, or CD back in the day, and you're on a bike. So at the end of every day, like my brother and I were completely destroyed, exhausted, and we could share that together. Because the production guys weren't like Chad, the director of photography, and then later Jesse or Daniel, who joined us. Like they were fine, they were fresh, right? 6 p.m. we were done. And then in India it was the same. Colin and I were going through the same experience. So it was nice. But then in Brazil I was by myself, and at the end of the day I was just crushed, and there was no one who really understood like what I'd been through.
Yeah, and I mean y'all experienced really hardcore days across the spectrum with those trips, but Brazil had the BR-15, was that it?
The BR-319, the Road of Ghosts.
Dude, I mean, the fact that you did that by yourself, and not truly by yourself, but the fact that you were the only one riding a bike through that mud is, I would imagine those were some of your most shot riding days.
So that was the worst. That was by far the most difficult stretch of road ever, because it was 1,000 miles, and it was like no electricity, no running water, no villages, no shelter, no food, no gas stations, no nothing, right? So the road was built in the 1960s by the military, and then they hadn't repaired it or done anything to it since the 1960s. So the jungle had just kind of clawed back the road, and there was like very little pavement. It was all knee-deep mud. It was raining 5 or 6 times a day. You're deep in the Amazon, no mobile phone signal, no fresh water. We had to carry, I remember we spent like 3 days in Manaus just getting ready for that road. So we had some guys come to our hotel who do that road in their cars, and they do it like once every month or two for fun.
Yeah.
And they have these super decked out off-road cars that go through mud and like huge wheels. And they looked at our bikes and stuff like that, and like, you're not going to make it. And we're like, what do we need? What do we need? What do we need? And there's like, well, you need to bring diesel for the car, because our Jeep took diesel. And then you need to bring gasoline for your motorcycle. So now we had to carry 2 types of fuel. Plus we had to carry like a huge thing of water. So we went to the grocery store and ended up buying these huge drums, and we filled up one with just diesel.
Yeah.
Because the car needed that. We had to fill up another one with gasoline, and then we had to fill up another one with drinking water. So in the back of the car, we had all this camera equipment, spare tires, spare clutch. Wasn't going to make that mistake again. But then we had like diesel, gasoline, water, and it was just insane. Like, and we're out there, and it was just the road of ghosts. It was terrifying in a lot of ways. And those bridges, we didn't know if any of those bridges were going to crash. So every single time we went over a bridge, we just held our breath.
These bridges were like stilted, like covered in red mud. Underneath, you've got like a rushing river, probably full of like poisonous animals, and they were like plank bridges.
Yeah.
You were driving your SUV over it.
Well, special shout out to Max, actually. So Max was our second cameraman and our driver in Brazil, and he had never been on a production before, but he was super gung-ho, and I'd met him a few times, and he spoke Portuguese.
Right.
And he had some experience in Brazil. So he did like an MBA program in Rio or Sao Paulo, spoke some Portuguese, and he just seemed like he had a really good attitude. So we just brought him along, taught him how to use a camera, but he drove that SUV through the mud, and he did a great job, because I don't think I could have driven a car through that. I barely got through on a motorcycle.
Y'all did have to use that, what was that crank? The like chain crank on the front of the Jeep?
Yeah, the crank, what's it called?
Does it start with an H?
A hinge, a hatch, a winch.
Winch, yes.
Yes.
And that scene was so fun to cut.
Well, remember we met the farmer. So we did like 90% of the BR-319, and we did it pretty successfully, but we did have to use the winch. So the problem wasn't like the problem on the BR-319, or actually the problem in the Amazon wasn't necessarily the motorcycle. Like, because if I'm on a motorcycle and I go through mud, one of the tires gets stuck, I fall over, pick up the bike, you keep going, right? Sure. But when the car gets stuck, it's like 1 or 2, 3 wheels, and then you got to pull out the winch, and then it's like, what do you hook the winch onto to pull the car out of the mud? And then, we had learned that these guys were using a truck axle, so this huge steel pipe, and they would hook the winch onto the pipe and then hammer the pipe into the mud, and then use the leverage in the mud to pull the car out. And we were trying to do that. And of course, you can imagine if that thing comes loose, it's coming right back at the car, right? So we're doing this the car was getting stuck 4 or 5 times a day in the mud. And I was falling off the bike. Some days in the jungle, we would only do like, in a 12-hour day, we would only do maybe like 30 miles.
Yeah, that was some of the most broken down moments from you that I've seen on camera.
Yeah.
Just so shot.
Just beside myself, exhausted, actually.
I mean, you can only fall off a bike so many times in a day where you're like, what the hell?
Well, at the beginning, I was just like, okay, like I had the pannier boxes on, right? And I had some stuff in there. And then I had my jacket on and my gloves. And I was like, okay, I'm going to be falling. I need to keep all my protective equipment on. But then it was like raining 6 times a day. And it was like, 35 degrees Celsius and humid, which is like almost 100 degrees Fahrenheit and humid. And it's just like, and then I was melting in my riding suit, so I had to take off my riding suit. And the thing that no one will tell you is that a motorcycle literally has to be going like 15 to 20 miles an hour in order for its cooling system to work. So, there's an underneath the steering chassis, there's a vent, and the vent goes in and cools the engine.
Sure.
Right? And you need to be moving in order for that to work.
Right.
But the problem is when you're going 30 miles a day, falling in the mud you're not cooling the bike. So the bike is getting hot and running, and the bike is heating you up from your seat from the inside. And then it's 35 degrees Celsius, 100 degrees Fahrenheit, raining 6 times a day. And then you're getting heat from the top and from the bottom. And I got heat stroke like almost every day.
Unreal. Yeah. Was that enough water that y'all brought?
It was enough water, yeah, but it was just terrible. I remember one day it rained, and like all the rain up until this point had been like warm rain. And I just remember like on day 5 or 6 out of that 7 or 8 day trip on that BR3, and I remember one day it rained and it was cold. And I just took off like all my clothes and sat in the mud and just took it all in for like an hour, and everyone was just like, what's he doing? And I was just like, there was like steam coming off my body. Like how much I needed to cool off.
Yeah.
But okay, back to you. So you come out of NYU and you need to figure out how to work in this industry. How daunting was that as like, besides the collaboration with me, which was kind of part-time, not very full-time, like you're 22, you've got this beautiful degree, spent lots of money on it.
Sure.
Where do you go to find work at that stage?
LA was the short answer. We were like, okay, we spent this final semester of school out here in LA. We thought we were getting a head start. Kind of did. Some of my friends through that program out here found work that they just continued doing. Their internships turned into full-time jobs. Mine didn't. And I was, yeah, like you said, editing for you like part-time. And it seemed like I'd gotten a handful of editing credits at NYU under my belt. Some of that work had gone to festivals. And so I was like, well, it seems like if I'm going to throw a resume together, if I'm going to throw a portfolio together, it's probably my best bet is to throw an editing portfolio together and pursue some post-production work. So I applied to the whole gamut. I just post companies that had openings, post companies that didn't have openings. I was just like, can I please work for you? And, heard back from maybe 1% of those emails, ended up getting an interview and a job as a runner, which is basically just an elevated intern position at this place called White House Post in Santa Monica. It's just like a really nice high-end post house that does a lot of commercial work. And it was the sort of place where after 6 months, I was looking around and I was like, okay, my responsibilities here are getting Starbucks in the morning, getting lunch for the editors, cleaning the office. It had nothing to do with post-production.
Those are all the things you learned at NYU though.
Right, yeah, right. So yeah, I'm going to NYU, and then I'm like wiping tables and like making sure all the LaCroix in the refrigerator are like facing outward, like they're yelling at me.
There's nothing worse than when the label's not facing when you're looking in the fridge. That's a pet peeve. Come on,
let that happen, right? And I was like, dang, I could see myself like climbing the ladder, so to speak, here for a long time. I could see myself probably. There were editors there who had started as runners like me, and they were like, yeah, basically I was like mistreated for 10 years, and then I got an opportunity to like edit. And I was
That's terrifying.
Right?
Yeah.
And I was like, is that how it goes? Is that just like what it is? And I was determined to find another way. So I was like, the most exciting film work I was doing was with you. Even though it was part-time, I was like, this is someone who is trusting me to edit and to do the craft that I am so desperate to exercise. And then I have this whole other like market in LA that seems to just want me to grind and take like 2 steps back just so I can get on the right track. And I think my ego was just too inflated. I was like, I'm better than this. I deserve to be actually editing. And so I said, you know what, screw it. I got kind of overwhelmed here in LA. I wasn't really sure why I was here anymore because I ended up quitting that post-production house position to pursue just other interests. I was doing some furniture work. I was like doing some like carpentry work, like repair stuff, because woodworking was something that just like kind of always interested me. And so I was like, well, maybe I'll split my time between part-time film editing for Ryan and then make my like the rest of my income from this blue collar work. And you know, I think a lot of kids, maybe not a lot, but like I fantasize blue collar work in this way of like, oh, it's just like so like straightforward. You know exactly what you're doing. You're getting specialized. I don't need a degree to pursue this thing, but it was brutal grinding work. And I was like, okay, I just took a step back after a year here, and I was like, I don't really want to go back to working at a post house, but I'm paying all this money to be here. The film work I am doing is remote, and the work I'm doing that is like based here is furniture repair, and I can do that anywhere. So I had a lot of friends in Asheville, North Carolina saying, you should move out here, man. You love music too. We have all this music going on. You can keep editing for Ryan. It's way cheaper out here. And I was like, what the hell? I gave it a shot, and I left LA and I ended up in Asheville, North Carolina.
Weren't you in Brooklyn before that? Because you were with Justin, weren't you?
Yeah, I did some bopping around. At that point, Justin was in Asheville. I went New York, LA, Asheville, New York again. So, I met up with my dear friend Justin, and we lived together in Asheville, and I was bartending and editing for you for a few years, and it was really great. It was really cheap to.
How crazy is that though? Like you go to NYU, and you're trained to be an elite storyteller.
Sure.
And you're told, or at least you're gleaned into the position like there's going to be space for you to be a storyteller in this market somehow, somewhere. And then you come out to LA and you just get overwhelmed by the garbage here.
Yeah.
And there's so much garbage here. Like it's unbelievable. I think if I would have started my career in the United States, I wouldn't have gotten anywhere.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's just as much the bullshit as it is the real work out here. It seems like it's so much. This conversation around nepotism is kind of like maybe too much now, but it really does seem coming out of NYU like okay, I'm looking around now. I graduated from NYU 2015, so getting close to 10 years out. I'm looking around. I'm seeing who's actually been able to make the work they want to out of NYU. It's the people whose parents are very well connected, and it's the people whose parents are very wealthy. And then there's maybe like a very, very small section of very driven individuals who have figured it out outside of that space. But yeah, it's just so frustrating. There's this fallacy that you're told at NYU that you are gonna be the next Scorsese, Paul Thomas Anderson, whatever. And I think they would do much better probably by their students if they were like, you're gonna get your ass kicked. Like that's what's gonna happen. And if you're lucky as hell, you'll get to work on some stuff you're passionate about. But mostly this is an industry like anything else, and it expects you to work outrageous hours, and it expects you to do nothing else and just bend over backwards for people who are really like gonna mistreat you. I wish I had a bit of a more of a sense of what film life was actually like, because NYU gives you this idea that it's just making movies with your friends all the time, and because your friends are NYU friends, you're probably just going to be successful. So just like make your movie, man. Just go do it.
Just go do it and pay us $50,000 a year.
Yeah, it's absurd. Yeah.
Well, so after I met you in 2014, I basically through you ended up working with only NYU people because you introduced me to the whole NYU mafia, and then every producer post-production supervisor, music composer, sound mixer. Like you brought in all of your friends to work on my shows, basically. That was amazing.
That's like probably, it's not the coolest thing about working with you, but it's one of easily is the fact that you've been so open-minded about like, because I would get it if I hired some kid who had like recently graduated from college and he was telling me like, you should really hire my friends. I'd probably be like, I don't know.
But by that stage, you were already editing enough of my shit, so you knew what we were doing.
Yeah,
and you knew Justin could make some cool music to go over this stuff, and I trusted you more than I trusted my own ears because I was not listening to music, and not thinking about how music would move the story along. I was just too busy trying not to fall off my motorcycle,
sure,
and to try to get through a day of filming, right?
Yeah.
So I think so much of, especially, I actually think that this is a real problem in the United States. In LA specifically, is just people just not trusting their creative partners enough. Because if you hire someone to be creative, you have to let them be creative. Like you can't tell someone, I'm hiring you because you're creative, and then put them in a box.
Yeah.
And then not let them work with who they want to work with, or not let them, explore things they want to explore. Like how many, I always love this because I would always, after every episode that I would send you, and this was for Expedition Asia, right? We were filming and you were doing the whole post-production, the whole editing and the whole thing. I would send you like the bare minimum of notes.
Yeah.
I'd be like, day 1, we did this. Day 2, we did this. Day 3, we did this. Look for that. This was fun. And then I wouldn't talk to you at all for like 2 or 3 weeks until you made your own rough cut.
Yeah.
And then we would go through it together.
Mm-hmm.
But you were on, like you nailed it. So like, why would I be fucking all over you every minute from the beginning? Like you knew where we were headed.
Yeah, I really, really appreciated that. I don't think I've ever gotten that amount of like creative license or agency on any other assignment. It was so good for my confidence, and it was so, I hope, just like good for the show, in the sense that there was like I was really that attitude, that approach made me really excited to work on this stuff. I was already excited because of the sort of jump of responsibility I was taking by going from online based video work to full like Discovery Channel broadcast content. That was already enough to be excited about, but then to have a person be like, to have you be like, I trust you and like run with it. That was just like the best, because it was just like, it almost made me work harder, because I was like, all of a sudden I'm feeling like, all right, I'm going to be allowed to really have my fingerprints all over this thing, and I really want it to reflect, I want my work to be good, and I want your work to be good too, obviously. But when you're all of a sudden being told like, you're going to like be a whole serious part of this, I just really, at that age, to be trusted with something that big, it was the opportunity of a lifetime.
It was fun because I met you in 2014, right? And then you did part-time work like 15, 16, 17, 18.
Yeah.
But it was because during that time I had all those jobs with Tourism Canada.
Yeah.
And then I needed a Chinese-speaking editor, so we had one of those. And then I was doing Extreme Treks with David, and my editor and post-production supervisor, because he helped me get that show started.
Right.
So this whole time I was still trying to I was giving you a lot of freelance work, but I was still waiting for like a project to come along that could be yours. And then all of a sudden Discovery Channel were like, hey, do something for us just in Asia, and like climbing, trekking, hiking, or whatever. And then it just worked out perfectly.
And it was a 10 episode package.
That broke the back, man. That was a tough one. Like 10 episodes, 10 expeditions, 10 countries, 10 months.
It was unreal.
Yeah.
We would just churn those episodes out. And I felt we found a rhythm really quickly. It was really cool to be involved also in the voiceover writing process, just because I think, your episodes have so much voiceover, or your Expedition Asia episodes do, and it was kind of a way for me to almost describe to you how I'm seeing this content come together, like writing rough drafts of what narration might look like. It was a way for me to like connect the dots and like do a lot of storytelling on my own. And I just felt like that was all. It would be one thing for you to just get a rough cut with no narration. I think like being able to like put some words over the content too it was oddly this like almost this extra conversation we were having of like how we see the story coming together, and you could fill in a lot of details about like things you were thinking on certain days. I love one of the coolest things I thought that you did with that content was like you said, you would really leave me to it to throw the episode together. But in the piece to cameras, you would oftentimes at the end of the piece to cameras leave a little note for me. Like you'd be doing your video diary of the day, and then you'd be like, okay, this is for Zach. Like definitely check out X, Y, and Z footage. That was amazing. We had a hard time with this. I want to like really focus in on this. It was just like a really fun way to collaborate. It was all so different and new and exciting. Yeah.
The video diaries I found were super, super useful. So I totally stole this too from Long Way Round, Long Way Down, like Ewan and Charlie doing there. Because they would often like in the evening do little video diaries and talk to the camera by themselves. They both had their own little like camcorders, right?
Okay, yeah.
And I loved the intimacy of that. But what I started to realize is like I'm like 10,000 miles away from my editor.
Yeah.
Like I can use this time to like make some notes.
Yeah.
And be like, hey, today we saw a dead camel on the trail and we stopped and filmed it. Like make sure we do something about that. And I also found like the video diaries were the place where you were able to pull a lot of the voiceover stuff too, right? Because there's two ways to make TV, right? You either just like flash bang people to death with cuts and music, which is pretty much all anyone does anymore, which is super exhausting. Or you find a beautiful part of the world and you let shots sit and you let people like absorb imagery.
Yeah.
With, voiceover, which moves the story along, and some great music. And no one does the latter anymore. Everyone's just like, slap bamming, cutting, just trying to make everything pop and whistle, and it's just exhausting. Whereas the kind of stuff I grew up watching, the producers and the directors were educating us about things. Like they would take us to Namibia and show us the Skeleton Coast and let us absorb the landscape and the people and the culture. And whereas now it's just like, let's watch a celebrity cook or fix a car. Like the whole idea behind this is different. Actually, I had a great, Patrick was here a couple weeks ago, and he was like, what do you want to do now? And I was like, I just want to not make people stupid. Like my goal is like to not make people more dumb than they already are. Cause I think media is dumbing down everyone and everything. Like it's just like we all come out of university or high school or whatever, and we're steak knives. Like we're ready to like enter the world and do something. And then it's just the media, the stuff we're watching, it all just dulls us down into nothing to the point where we just become sheep. And I just can't handle just making anything that turns people into that. It just makes me frustrated so much.
Yeah, your content trusts the audience. It trusts that it feels more like reading a book in like the best way. Like, like fast cut scenes for sure. I mean, we had had so much fun in the Bhutan desert. There's this intro where you're getting out there, and we had a lot of fast cutting of like your car like taking on these sand dunes and stuff. We had exciting moments by all means, but it wasn't just like this high octane like flashbang, like 2-second shots over and over and over, like assuming that the audience doesn't have the attention span to pay attention to something that's actually interesting.
Sure. Your
content is genuinely interesting. I hate that I even called it content. It's just like it's really real. And there is, at least in America, it feels like less and less of a market for that, but it feels so important. Like, it feels like, especially now with like Bear Grylls as an example of someone who inspired me so much growing up, is now just like taking Shaquille O'Neal out to like, I don't know, cook like ribs in the jungle or something, and they're probably staying at a hotel that night. It's just like, we need someone to remind us that like the world is beautiful and that like chance encounters are beautiful, and that like I just think your episodes are in a really, just by virtue of like sticking to the fundamentals of like let's make good content, has now like ended up in a space of its own, because I feel like people feel there are these boxes that need to be checked in order for something to be marketable, and those boxes just don't let down, like you said.
The guy that I love the most is Les Stroud. And he still is on Discovery Channel, but doing other stuff. But he had a show called Survivorman.
I saw that.
Where he would go out into nature by himself, no crew,
right?
With his own camera and a tripod.
Yeah.
And he would survive by himself and film by himself for like 3, 4, 5 days. And you never knew what was going to happen. Nothing was scripted. He was just talking to the camera by himself, and we were just watching. And he had a production crew that would be in a different area, like days away, and they would be doing B-roll and sunrises and sunsets and things like that, and like great animal shots. And then he would be out there surviving, and then they would mix it together later, and that was Survivorman. But like he's the OG, like he's the original, right? And like his show couldn't even get on today. Like it's amazing. Like I had a production meeting a couple weeks ago with someone who was just like, we would rather spend 10x doing something with Chris Hemsworth, who plays Thor for Marvel, than to give you 10% of that budget and let you go out and do something authentic and interesting. And it's just like, okay, that's where the market is today. It's insane. Yeah,
it's really a bummer. Because like that education aspect, the beauty of the content y'all were getting, because I mean you would go to these places that I had never even heard of. Like I remember when I got footage from Kyrgyzstan, I was like, I actually,
the Turkestan circle or circuit, yeah, that was a good one.
Oh, it was incredible. And it's like some of the most beautiful nature I've ever seen. And it's like, I remember I would cut an episode of Ryan Pyle content, I'd be like, I need to go camping, like I need to go like get out there, like this is inspiring me, like and yeah, I don't feel that anymore. I don't know where there's Alone, but that's so game show based. Do you know what Alone is?
I don't know Alone. What's that?
It's kind of like Survivorman, but it's a bunch of contestants that are supposed to be survival experts, and they're just like dropped off in the middle of nowhere, Alaska or something, and whoever survives on their own the longest wins $200,000 or something like this. But it's still so
sounds like a Mr. Beast episode.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's still got that just like corny, like
it has a corny hook, right?
Yeah. And it's like I would watch your content, and I would just be left with the impression of like, I want to go out and see the world. And when I see other content like that, I just kind of feel like I'm cruising through YouTube. And like, just you can feel the fakeness of it.
There's some good stuff on YouTube. Like I've always wanted to continue making like broadcast quality television.
Yeah.
But there's some good stuff on YouTube where there's a lot of people going out, like doing trekking, doing climbing, and they're not really talking to camera, not educating people, but they're giving us the imagery, and they're putting themselves in the imagery, and they're kind of letting the audience build their own narrative to their imagery. And I like that. Like, I think it's quite beautiful. Like there's one guy that goes out and he does these like 30-minute clips, and they're all on YouTube, and it's just, him walking, the drone following him setting up camp, waking up in the morning, couple, like maybe a time lapse here or there. But he doesn't talk, doesn't try to educate anyone, doesn't really explain where the path is or what kind of people live there or what the local food is. It's just him in beautiful nature and nice music, and he's getting like millions of views on YouTube. And it's really like peaceful and nice, and it makes you want to go out and camp. That was the purpose of that note, but it makes you kind of want to get out there and see the world. Whereas, whatever is being done on broadcast TV or even streaming has avoided travel entirely, which is really disappointing.
Totally. It's like Bourdain left this void. It's not even that Bourdain was doing like the trek business either, but like if I see travel content, it's him and him alone, basically. And it's just I feel I would have to assume there's still a huge audience of people who want to see this stuff. Like it's really surprising that there's not more of a.
I wonder if the pendulum will swing back at some stage where it's like we want to have these people out there doing this so that we don't have to, right? Or like we want to stay curious about the world. I feel like it's almost like the more we know or the more we have access to, the less people want to watch or the less people want to commission those kinds of shows, right? Because it's almost like there's too much availability. I had one television producer as a production, or not a production, what is it? Just an executive producer at a streaming partner. He just said like, oh, travel, that's just for YouTube. Like we're only doing high-end stuff like scripted stuff and fiction. And if it's nonfiction, it's got to have a celebrity in it, basically.
It's just a bummer. I don't want to see celebs in my like content that's meant to feel real.
I don't mind taking Shaquille O'Neal out anytime.
Sure.
Shaq, I'm ready.
Yeah, right. Let's take it. Yeah, absolutely.
As long as I can do my own thing at some stage too, right? Because that's where the magic is.
Definitely. Yeah, I think you struck a balance that I still have not seen recreated it lived in this perfect space between the like oversaturating, I'm going to try to excite you 110% of the time, and those silent like trekking YouTube videos. There was like a real respect for the nature around you, but you would fill in the gaps that felt necessary to. Like it was really cool to just watch you even have like brief exchanges with like some villagers in Thailand or something as you trek through their village, or like share a meal with someone. You just I felt like you were able to bring us into these experiences without like over explaining. Like you would give us just enough so that we left these episodes knowing a lot more about a certain place of the world, but there was still a lot just left to us to just quietly observe, which I felt like was the right balance of like how it feels to actually trek and be outside and be in awe of nature, but to do it with a guide that you trust.
Yes.
I haven't seen anything else like it. Yeah.
Well, it's because we didn't rate. Like, like we just didn't get the ratings to make the money to make it like valuable, because we couldn't compete against cooking shows, and we couldn't compete against car repair shows or pimp my ride shows or whatever the fuck it was, right?
Yeah.
And if there's a Hollywood celebrity involved, we couldn't compete against that either. So it's just like we just got edged out at some stage, and then COVID put the lid on the fucking can, and that was it. Kicked it off the mountain.
That was a real because we were gearing up for like quite a bit of content right at that time in 2020.
Well, you remember, right? Because I did Extreme Treks 2 in 2016, Extreme Treks 3 in 2017. Then I was doing that big massive project for Tencent in 2018, and then we got Expedition Asia in 2019. And then I must have had like 4 or 5 gigs lined up for 2020, including a bunch of big projects in Saudi Arabia. Patrick and I were laughing when he was here a couple of weeks ago. I was like, I hired him the first week of March 2020. I hired him full time. I was like, this is going to be a huge year. He was like, what about China? I was like, don't worry about China. We're going to have a huge year. 2020 is going to be it. And I was like, I'm going to hire a full-time producer to like help me, just manage more stuff. And that was like how much we were ramping up.
Yeah. Oh, it was the worst timing, because I wonder how it would have gone if we had gotten started on all that content.
It would have been better because I would have been paid, right?
Yeah.
Like I would have had like, because we were already doing development work for some of the projects before we had received our first payment, and they were dragging their feet on the payment because I think deep down they knew they were going to, Saudi anyways, they were going to close their borders. And I was always super keen to explore Saudi Arabia. Like many people might have a lot of apprehension going there to film, but I would rather go there, film it, see it myself, talk to the people, know who I'm talking to, and make my own observations and judgments than watch someone else do it, or watch someone who's going to go there with some kind of agenda, right?
Right.
Like I'd rather just be that guy.
Yeah.
And I was super pumped up to kind of go there and explore and understand a little bit more about what was going on. And they didn't, it was in the contract that I had full editorial control. So there was, whatever happened was going to happen. But I was, super disappointed that that didn't kind of get played out.
definitely. I mean, such a influential part of the world right now, and to like, again, it's just like no one's really asking like, what's this place like on the ground? What's this place like naturally? What's it like to just wander and talk to people who really just exist here, and without that agenda, it would have been great. That's the sort of like formula that I think I just don't really see it anymore. Like,
Well, that's because there's less stuff out there, right?
yeah,
Like there's bigger stuff, but less. So again, this production executive was telling me, he's like, we would rather spend $10 million doing something with Chris Hemsworth than to spend $1 million on 10 independent producers like you, to tell 10 different diverse stories and maybe have one of them break through or two of them break through, or maybe some will win an Emmy or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Instead, it's just like Marvel superhero, rock climbing, cooking,
guaranteed.
and yeah, just and whatever, right? And then that's the thing that'll bring in the ratings. And I just feel like, that's just kind of numbing us all to just this celebrity culture where nothing's really going on.
Yeah. I'm so sick of seeing Chris Hemsworth. I'm so sick of seeing like Jason.
He's a nice guy. Yeah, Jason Momoa wasn't in the climbing show for Discovery Channel. He just like showed up at the end to like judge them.
That's right. And it's funny because that show is like so marketed around him, and yeah, he would just show up.
Yeah. I think the only person whose content I really like, the only person whose storytelling I really still like watching in the nonfiction space is Jimmy Chin, because I feel like he doesn't really focus on the culture of where they are normally, but he has like a great respect for nature and obviously a great respect for the personalities in it. And, obviously the things he's done with Alex Honnold has been amazing. And, he has a photography background too, which, helps him as, composition and just storytelling in general. And I think his stuff is still quite exceptional, but like he's the only one. And he's doing documentary, like he's doing massive like feature documentaries. He's not even doing episodic stuff anymore.
Yeah, he's an exception for sure. And I think, but still there is a little bit of that, like at least with Free Solo, it's just like, yeah, it's nothing that you can like borrow from. It's like, how do you borrow from Free Solo? It's like there's no way, there's one person who would ever do this, and it's like he's got this perfect confluence of like climbing background and photography background that just like is incredible. He's amazing.
And he has a good group of friends that are doing extraordinary things as well.
All the time, it seems like.
But the thing I have with the North American storytelling mentality when it comes to like adventure content or nature content, is the like rah, I'm unstoppable, I'm unbeatable, I'm the king of the world kind of like feeling. And I feel like this has to be an element of a show in order to do well in the United States. Like you can't have someone walk 150 miles across a desert in northern China and just be humble that they're still alive at the end of it.
Yeah.
Like they have to be like, shirt off, banging your chest like, I'm the fucking greatest who's ever lived. Yeah.
This is my desert now. Yeah, I remember one note you gave me, which was really influential and solid, was I think it was the first episode I was cutting of Expedition Asia, Mount Apo in the Philippines, in a rough draft of a little bit of voiceover. I wrote something along the lines of like, we've finally now conquered X, Y, or Z stretch of the mountain, and you were like, we're never going to use words like conquer or like, because like we're never going to imply that we've dominated nature at all. And I was like, oh yeah, totally. That's like, that is such an American.
Yeah. Because nature always wins, and it'll fucking kill you if you're not respectful of that. And like people, like it's like that Mount Elbrus, like here comes this electrical storm coming from the other side of the mountain, and we didn't even see it.
Yeah.
And we could have died. Like, and if you're not ready for that or willing to accept that, like every day you go out, then you're living in a false world, because you can't control any of that. And it's insane how many people, like, again, they're like, they climb mountains and they think like they're the fucking untouchable, like beyond reproach. But it's like, no, we're all just an inch away from dying at some stage. Like, breathe it in and accept it.
Yeah, totally. It's, I don't know where this like, I beat nature mindset came from. I guess, it just feels very Western world.
Yeah. But Chinese too, actually, but more like with the government, like we're going to build the biggest dam in the world.
Oh,
we're going to like control nature, right?
Yeah.
They do it with like massive infrastructure projects,
Right.
right? And in North America, it's just, Tom Cruise and a whole bunch of crazy adventure athletes doing ridiculous shit.
Red Bull.
Red Bull, anything. I really wanted to do a show with them a long time ago, and they just said I wasn't hardcore enough.
They probably wanted you.
It's like, will you base jump at the end of a trek? And I'm like, no, like that's terrifying.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I got another trek after this.
Okay, so 2019. So I remember 2018. This was, by the way, this was how easy it was to make television back in the day. I remember we were doing post-production on Extreme Trek Season 3 with David. We were in production on the Granny Knows Best series with Tencent, with my buddy Jamie, who was doing the cooking. I flew down to Singapore, and Discovery Asia was just like, okay, great, we want to do a show with you. Handshake, contract's coming. That's the amount per episode. Can you do it? I said, yes. Handshake. It was done. And then I remember I called you like right after that. I was like, okay, this is our shot. Like, you want this series? Because David was already doing Extreme Treks because that was his baby. We had to have a Chinese editor for Tencent's project because it was all Chinese. And then, so this Discovery Channel thing came up. And then I just remember you're like, this is going to dominate my life for like a year and a half. And I was like, absolutely. Like, it's on now.
This is all you're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I quit my bartending job. I moved to an apartment that had an extra room that I just turned into a studio, and just waited so excitedly for that first Tires drive to come. And then it came, and I was like, it's one thing to anticipate. I remember what I did is I opened up, so I pulled up some Extreme Treks episodes, and I took out a pen and paper, and I wrote down every single shot that happened, and I put the time code beside it. I was like, 15 seconds, Ryan is now talking about this. Like 16 seconds, we're now on a wide shot of the city. Like 20 seconds in, okay, now we're on a drone shot. It was like so detailed, and I was like, this is the only way I'm going to be able to like wrap my head around how to make television, because I'm thinking like, I've just been making 5-minute social vids or pitch trailers, whatever it was for you, and now I have to make a 46-minute episode. I was like, do I know how to do that? And I think ironically, I just never should have doubted myself, because I had spent so much time with your content, and I think I just really, I mean, even more so after Expedition Asia, but I knew your voice. I knew how you approached life, and I think I never opened up that notebook and was like, okay, I'm going to copy Extreme Treks. That would have been a disservice to this other show, but it did. I was really nervous. I was really excited. And then it was really just a matter of like doing it. Like you can't prepare yourself because you don't know what the footage is going to look like. So you just got to just hit it.
And did I ever ask you, like, have you ever edited a 46-minute episode before?
No, the trust you had in me was so extreme, and really like has set me up for success like throughout the rest of my life. Like I so appreciate the trust you've had in me.
Well, we worked hard, man. Do you remember what the production schedule was like? Like we started filming in January. I wrapped the Tencent project, and then we started filming Expedition Asia in February, right? And we did Philippines, China, Indonesia, Malaysia, Mongolia, Taiwan, Thailand, Kyrgyzstan, Hong Kong, and India. And we did them like 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. So I would make notes for you on an episode, maybe do some VO in a studio in some part of the world. Yeah. The most fun part about traveling that much was having to find studios in all the different places, because we would be laying down audio and voiceover stuff every month for some of it. And I remember like whenever I got an episode from you, I would try to make notes as quickly as we could, and then I would schedule in an audio session. We do the VO, and then I'd go back into the field for 2 weeks, and then when I came back, I'd have another rough cut. We'd go through that, and I'd be sending you new footage. And to be managing like 10 hours of this stuff, do 10 expeditions was insane, just the amount of back and forth.
It was insane. Our schedule made it so that, like you're saying, we would have, like when we first got started, obviously you just have one episode, but then you go back into the field and start shooting, and then I get that second episode's footage before the first episode is truly wrapped up, and then you've got episodes starting to stack, and I don't have an assistant editor. It was just me, so yeah, the time management was wild there, and yeah, it was just oddly the most I've ever worked in my life, and the least I ever felt like I was working.
Yeah.
So it was just exactly what I wanted to be doing, and that footage is the best I've ever gotten to.
Well, Chad won an award for best cinematography. So yeah, so he did well. He did well on that. But it was epic. The only problem I have with that is like for the BBC stuff I did, they never gave me any notes and they never asked me to do anything. They just said like keep it global. That's all. Like don't make it regional, right? Like we love that you film on 5 continents. Just keep making it like global. That was the only note I ever got, which was great. But for Discovery Channel, they really wanted it to be done in Asia. And so the way it works is each country in Asia like buys a certain amount of ad sales from Discovery Channel. So they were like, you have to film in the Philippines. And I was like, well, the Philippines is kind of interesting, but not like super adventurous.
Right.
And if it is adventurous, you're in a jungle and that's kind of hard to film. Like can't really use a drone, can't really get a sense of space. And then like, and we need you to film in Thailand. And I was like, Thailand, like you go to a small village in Thailand, everyone has a TV and the road is paved and everyone owns a car. Like it's not remote, right? I mean, what we did in India, like Jagasuk Peak, what we did in China, obviously the Badain-Jarain Desert, what we did in Kyrgyzstan with the Turkestan circuit, like that was, and what we did in Mongolia proper with Mount Kuten Peak, that was epic.
So
yeah.
just,
but then you match that up with like Philippines, okay, wonderful people, but Mount Apo, not too exciting. And then Thailand, I was pretty just disappointed with that entirely, just because it wasn't like adventurous. And I'm not an actor, right? So if it's not like really adventurous and you're not really out there, I can't really fake it. Like, oh, we're staying with a local family and they have a car and the road's paved and we're watching TV with the family. Like it doesn't feel like you're on the edge of something like you did in the Badain-Jarain Desert, where you're like, fighting these sand dunes every day and you're out with a 16 camel caravan and there's nothing between you and the next road except like 150 miles of nothing.
Your guide's barely speaking, and if he is, it's probably not in English.
How good was Hasamong?
The most iconic character. I mean, yeah, gosh, he was incredible. There was a huge difference in some of the wildness of some of these places, but that was something I also really appreciated about the post-production process with you, was we didn't lie. We never set out to like make it seem like something was something it wasn't. Like if there were paved roads, yeah, sometimes you would like hop on paved roads and then like that paved road would turn into a real trail. And Taiwan was a little bit that way, I think, like started very developed and then got into like, oh, this is like, we're pretty out there now. But it was cool. Like I think like the process of starting in the city and moving into the wild too was something that I really liked. To sort of shows the accessibility and there's this trend of like, and you can too, in like YouTube travel content, but it's never the way, like you never explicitly like ask the audience to get out there and do exactly what you're doing, but you're showing them how, like in a lot of ways, which is very cool. Like it's accessible. It's a huge puzzle, and that's a part of the adventure. But I loved just how like honest it was, regardless of where we were.
I think all good adventure content has to start in a city, because if you're traveling, you have to land somewhere.
Sure.
And you have to kind of acclimatize and get used to where you are, and get past the jet lag and things like that. So those days filming in the city were really nice. And for example, the Taiwan episode was great because you land in Taipei. It's a big bustling city. It's full of energy and culture and life. And you're there, you're walking the street, you're seeing some historical buildings, you're kind of getting a sense of what Taiwan is. And then you head out into the countryside, and then you have this, totally amazing experience. And it's funny, like a lot of the executives at the broadcaster didn't like the fact that I started in the cities. They're like, why don't you just start on the trail? And I was like, because they need a reference point to like where you are, right? Like most people travel,
Sure.
and most people travel from one city to another. And then if you want to like go out and explore something, you usually have to leave the city and try to get somewhere else, right? And I was like, it kind of fits the way someone would follow in my footsteps, or to show people like that the start of this trail is only an hour away from the downtown city center of Taipei.
Sure.
Like, and that's how accessible it is. And I I wanted to be able to show that. And it was only like the first 3 or 4 minutes of the episode. We weren't like doing 20 minutes in Taipei and then,
No.
30 minutes on the trail. Like, it was a nice balance. But it's funny, like, sometimes I guess they felt like it started too slow or something like that. But I loved it.
Yeah, it was, I thought it was so important. And if we hadn't done that, we also would have missed out on some really iconic montages that we were able to put together. For instance, I remember one of my favorites was in Mongolia. If we hadn't gone to Ulaanbaatar, which, by the way, is like half of the country's population lives in Ulaanbaatar, I think.
Yeah.
Like, we would have never gotten those incredible van and truck sequences driving out to the Cudan Peak like area, like those incredible like shots of y'all driving through like fields of wild horses, getting to the first campsites. It really like gives the whole episode much more of the feeling of an arc, like a progression, storyline,
and a feeling of too of like how remote it really is, right? Like,
right.
When if you start, in minute 1 on the trail, there's no reference point to where the trail is or how you got there, and you're missing a whole. That's a huge part of the romanticism.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, and then you think about episodes like Hong Kong, it would be possible to. The whole point of that episode is just like, wow, did you ever think about the fact that there's incredible nature, like literally on the edge of this hugely densely populated city? Like you had like one of the most extreme climbing, if not the most extreme climbing, like stint in your episodes in Hong Kong, like with the city in the background there. It's like, it was very cool. Yeah.
The Hong Kong episode was epic.
Yeah.
We want to get into it? Okay, so this is it. Like, so Discovery Channel asked me to do 10 episodes. They tell me a few countries I have to film in. And then actually when we were filming the Taiwan episode, I was in Taipei with someone from Discovery Channel because they have an office there also. And then it turns out like, they're like, okay, you need to make Hong Kong one of your episodes. So we're like, we've already filmed like 5 or 6 episodes. And they're like, we need you to make Hong Kong an episode. And I'm like, okay, this is Expedition Asia. And you want me to do an episode in Hong Kong. And the Tourism Bureau, we're going to, help out and chip in probably or whatever. And I was like, okay, like how do I make Hong Kong look adventurous? Because it's just a huge city, right? Okay, well, obviously there's the Mako-Host Trail, which goes across the northern part of the island. Okay, that's pretty adventurous, pretty tough, over 100 kilometers, 60 miles, pretty wild. And then I knew there was some rock climbing that we could get in there. So we did the Lion's Rock climb with, that was an epic day. And then I was like, okay, we can probably put it together, but it's not like, but again, like the problem with something like Hong Kong is you have to construct the adventure. Like you have to think like, okay, I can add this, that'll be a couple good minutes of like something pretty fucking hard and cool. And then we try to do something here, but you end up like, what you end up doing is you end up putting together like blocks of 5 or 6 minutes of something that could work. And then if it doesn't work, it ends up being like 2 minutes of like flat content.
Mm-hmm.
But if you really are out in the wild, all of that stuff is totally taken care of by itself because you're in the fucking wild and you can't control anything. And when shit goes wrong, it goes wrong and you just film it, right? Like you don't have to overproduce anything when you're really out there.
Yeah.
And that's I think where the best stuff comes from.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's an inauthenticity, I think, feeling that comes from resources being too close. And if you're 100 kilometers away from the nearest city, little problems become like really amazing plot points. And like not having whatever, like enough water for the camels. I feel like those camels in the Bhutan, they didn't drink until y'all got to like an abandoned like farm, and there was like some well literally the middle of like, that was definitely the most extreme example of y'all just being away from everything. But if you ever needed to emphasize a point, a revelation, you just cut to one of those drone shots that just keeps rising and rising and rising, and you see.
Yeah. And how many people just don't do that anymore? Like from a storytelling standpoint, like to be my favorite, my favorite shots were from the Badain Desert. Let me tell you this, and then I'll go back to Hong Kong. So, the Badain Desert, right? 150, 140 kilometers, 100 miles through the desert. But when you watch that episode, you'll see drone shots, and you'll see me and Hassamong, the two of us, up at the front, and you'll see a 16 camel caravan, and then you'll see his wife who was cooking, and his brother who was helping us with the camels. And then that's it. You won't see anyone else. And it's like, well, where are the camera guys? You know what we did is we put Chad and Jesse on the camels and put blankets over them. So Jesse was on a camel laying down with a blanket over him, and Chad was sitting up with a blanket over him, and he was flying the drone because we didn't want the camera guys to be in the shot, because that ruins the romance of it. Like, sure. we wanted to be out in the wild, and then too, like the other thing you need to understand, like when you're in the desert, the camel caravan doesn't stop. So the camels don't like stopping. So when you leave in the morning, you don't stop until camp in the evening, but you still need to shoot, right? So how do we shoot without being miles behind the camel caravan? Because it's dangerous to be miles behind the caravan because you're not with your guides. And then also too, it's soul destroying to be so far behind the camel caravan that you can barely see them anymore. And then you start walking slower, you start dragging your feet, it becomes psychological. So the best way of getting through a day is to be up with Hassamong leading the camels. You feel fresh, you feel like you're with him, and that's it. So anytime we wanted to do a lot of filming, we wanted to be up with Hassamong, but it's like, okay, but how do we keep the camera guys out of the shot?
Sure.
And they were on the camels with the big blankets over them. And Chad was like under there, like flying the drone. I love that. It was like, little producing secret.
Yeah, that's incredible. I remember there's so many of those beautiful shots are just like directly overhead the caravan, which is like a single sort of twisting line as you navigate the dunes, and just the amazing hard shadows from like the low sun. You can barely see the camels because they're sort of they're upright and you're directly above them, but their shadows are just like waving along the sand beside them. And I guess under this camels are Chad, Jesse, movie magic.
Yeah, because we just didn't want to have the crew trailing along with the camel drivers. Yeah, right. It would have been terrible. Yeah. And then of course we didn't want to have, we thought about like having the crew in a car, in a Jeep, right, traveling near us, right? Sure. But then it's like, if you saw tire tracks, it'd be over. So it's like, well, we can't do that because we can't like ruin that authenticity of actually doing the journey. Sure. So that was a good one. Okay, back to Hong Kong. So we're filming Hong Kong, Expedition Asia, December 2019. They were having huge democracy protests in Hong Kong. And we were staying in the same hotel that Edward Snowden was in when he escaped from the United States and then ended up in Hong Kong and then ended up in Russia, right? So we booked that hotel just because we thought it'd be cool. So we were there. But every morning we would wake up and have breakfast. So what we were doing, for everyone that knows, we would go out and film on the Maclehose Trail and do the climbing sequences and do all the trekking sequences. And then there's nowhere to camp out there really. And of course there's no batteries, to recharge stuff, and there's no resources. So we would come back to the hotel after dark, rest, recover, charge, sleep, wake up the next morning, go back out to where we left off and continue, right? Yeah. So we had some continuity because you just can't, there's not much you can do with Hong Kong. But waking up every morning to the smell of tear gas and to the riots and to the chaos. And here we are, like, I have a background as a journalist for the New York Times. Like, I was like, let's go cover the protests. Like, let's go see what's going on, right? But then, we had this thing and we had to just make it look like it was an adventurous place, Hong Kong. And it was such like a unique kind of strange feeling, because normally when we film, we're really out in the middle of nowhere and we don't really interact with anyone. But in Hong Kong, you're waking up smelling tear gas. You're watching the news at breakfast and there's like police riots and like they barricaded themselves in the university, and this is all happening like a mile away. And then you got to like, okay, put all that away. Let's go climb, Lion Rock and film it really well. And it was so strange to like try to film an adventurous, aspirational travel sequence during the same time where you had these massive riots going on.
Oh yeah, the Hong Kong had the world's attention then. That was huge. I'm sure you were also worried, wondering if it was going to affect your shoot, your ability to be there. Like,
it made it hard to get taxis in and out, and just a lot of taxis in the evening didn't want to drop us off downtown. We were staying in Kowloon, so they didn't want to go all the way into the city because that's where the protests were. So they would drop us out. We had to like walk in with all the cameras and stuff like that. After like a full day of filming, it was exhausting.
Yeah, that was a trip. I mean, and I think it's that's something I really appreciated about Expedition Asia in general, was just the extremes of Bhutan Desert to Hong Kong. Like, covered a lot of ground there, and then there's some more in betweens in terms of accessibility. Maybe like Kinabalu, Malaysia. It's like, this is an accessible place. There's infrastructure to bring you up here, but it's hardcore and it's gorgeous, and it's it's a real commitment.
If I could have done Expedition Asia differently or done it again, I would have included like Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, instead of like nothing against the Philippines and Indonesia and Malaysia and on all these kinds of places, or Thailand as well. Like, I would have taken all those countries out and just made it like really balls out. Like, we're going to be in the middle of nowhere every single episode. There's not going to be anyone around us. Like at Kinabalu, I mean, it was great to climb Kinabalu, and we met amazing people, and the Malaysians are wonderful and hospitable, and we made a lot of good friends. But climbing Kinabalu with like 1,000 other Malaysians is, it's not that, I think they wanted me to do something in the jungle there, but because it's Borneo, right? It's like, but filming in the jungle is miserable. And again, you're so closed in, like, cause I did an episode of Extreme Treks in Papua New Guinea, right?
Right.
And we walked about 100 miles in 8 or 10 days through the rainforest of Papua New Guinea. And it was so hard to film because you were just enclosed. It's like the Appalachian Trail, like you mentioned earlier, right? Like, you're just in a tunnel in a jungle forever. And it's like, okay, bugs, spiders, nature, great. Okay, we got some of that. Okay, and then, but we wouldn't ever come out of the jungle until camp at the end of the day. And then that's where we could do some filming, and maybe I'd do some extra walking. And then we filmed the guys because they were cooking, and maybe one guy was playing a guitar, like some camp life. But during the daytime, it was just mud and tunnel vision.
Sure.
And it's not that aspirational or interesting. It's hard.
It's tough.
Yeah. But then to do that again in Malaysia or Indonesia or something like that. We did a little bit of it in Indonesia when we walked across Bali, right? But it was but again, like, you need to be able to show people the landscape, show people the culture and things like that. And I just feel like jungles are very difficult and miserable.
Yeah, I'm thinking about drone flying in the jungle. That would just be super risky, I imagine, like the canopies.
We've destroyed so many drones.
I'm sure, yeah, totally. I mean, Brazil, I'm sure, posed its own set of issues for that with tough rides, but yeah, I'm sure I some of that drone footage, I'd be like pretty close to that waterfall or that rock face or whatever it was.
Yeah. So 2019, the highlight of your career thus far, you get to run an entire series.
Sure.
Highlight for me, I get to do my first big epic 10-episode project for Discovery Channel. So you and I, December 2019, are flying high. And you and I, at this stage, still have at least 6 months of post-production work to go before we're wrapped on all 10 episodes. Because I think we had to deliver a few by Christmas, and then the rest was like June 2020, right? So even all through the pandemic, you and I were still editing and working. I remember that.
Yeah. The last thing you shot, was that India in January 2020? Was that the last?
No, it was Hong Kong, December 2019, because we had our wrap party there with Chad and Jesse. And then January, I was in St. Petersburg and Moscow.
Right.
Which seems like a lifetime ago.
Sure.
And then I went to Saudi Arabia in January 2020. I did that driving trip.
Right.
And then February, I went to Myanmar and did Extreme Treks. And then in March, I went to Ethiopia, and that's where I got stuck.
That's where you got stuck. Oh my gosh. Wild. Oh, that could have been a bad place to get stuck.
They were having anti-foreigner protests in Addis Ababa as I was leaving, like the capital, because because Ethiopia has a ton of Chinese immigrants and Chinese workers. And when COVID started happening in China, the knee-jerk reaction, stereotypical problem was, oh, the Chinese brought this, right?
Sure.
But obviously the Chinese that were in Ethiopia had been there for months before COVID even was a thing, and they weren't really going back and forth, but they had like this huge kind of like anti-China protest, and then it became like, you know, get rid of everyone, close the borders, and I was like, holy shit, I got to get out of here.
Remember texting you being like, I don't know if they're gonna, like, I don't know how long Chad and Ryan are stuck here, like week, I think, or something.
No, we got out in like 48 hours after all the borders kind of closed. Yeah, but then I ended up in Turkey. But where were you thinking? Like, so here you are. We just did Expedition Asia 1.
Yeah.
Like, I was definitely keen to do a second one. You're still in post-production, and then like the world closes. Like, where was your head? Because you were in North Carolina when this all played out. What were you going through?
I mean, it was some cognitive dissonance in the sense that, like, Asheville didn't get COVID officially, like, for like a month or two after shit really hit the fan in like Seattle. So everything's changing for travel television, but my day-to-day life is quite similar. Like, people are all of a sudden a lot more freaked out, and masks are becoming a thing. People are like washing everything, but like nothing had happened. It was very much a calm before the storm, and it didn't feel real. Yeah, in a lot of ways, because I'm still working on this content that was cut or that was shot when no one was concerned. This had not gained national attention throughout any of, I think, our shooting. So I just thought it was going to be 2 weeks. I think like many people, I just thought it was going to be a really short-term thing. I was like, I had no experience, of course, with a international like lockdown. I didn't think that was possible. And yeah, like you said, we had a huge amount of work that we were gearing up to do in 2020. It felt so locked in. I remember thinking like, oh, this is kind of nice. I'm gonna have like a little 2-week vacation just to like be at home and like take a breather, because I'd been working hard and I'd been like really socially active in that part of my life too, and I was just kind of like exhausted. And then it just kept going, and I was like, oh no, like Saudi Arabia kind of folks that we had some work contracted with over there. It's just I think they like kind of stopped picking up the phone, sort of thing, and
Completely.
it was just like really like there was just a lot of like wait and see. But yeah, I was terrified in a lot of once we passed like the month mark, and things just kept getting harder and harder. Borders keep shutting down. I was like, well, shit, I'm in Asheville, North Carolina. There's not like a real filmmaking prospects here for me. Like, I brought Ryan Pyle work here, and I very much anticipated continuing back-to-back program editing with you for years to come. And
We should be in season 5 of Expedition Asia.
we should. I know.
Yeah.
We should be running out of countries right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just, I think it was a real trip to watch you be in cities and be editing city content pre-COVID, while like looking out the window and there's like not even a car on the road. There was some, real strange times. And all of a sudden, yeah, I was like, I was just reckoning with the fact that like I was probably, I mean, we just had some really frank conversations about how it was like, okay, travel TV is going to get knocked on its ass here. This is going to be like probably one of the hardest hit areas of filmmaking. It's going to be travel-based TV, and it was probably the hardest hit.
Well, you couldn't cross a border. You couldn't get on an airplane. Like, how are you supposed to do 10 expeditions in 10 countries in 10 months to do 10 episodes when you can't, leave your county? Or in Canada, you couldn't cross the provincial borders, or in some states you couldn't cross the state borders, like let alone fly to London or something like that.
Oh, yeah, nothing like that. So, I mean, we were lucky in that Expedition Asia was shot. I think you were in the middle of an extreme trek season, though. Like, right with Ethiopia, you were shooting extreme treks, and then that ended up being like a half season. But there was just like no new content on TV for like 3 years or something. It was absurd.
Yeah, the royalties did well though. Like people bought a lot of the old shows. That was like a highlight because I own them still. But yeah, there's nothing being made fresh. And now I feel like coming out of COVID, everyone is so risk averse. First of all, everyone's changed jobs since COVID. Like no one is still the director of production at, you know, Discovery Channel, like, and they no one has the same job they had in 2018, basically.
Sure.
And so, you know, now it's trying to get all these people, you know, figure out who they are, figure out what they want to see, try to pitch them. But everyone is just so risk averse now because, you know, 3 years of nothing, people got laid off, it was, you know, terrible.
Definitely. And like this reality TV, like, era sort of was ushered in, I feel like, by COVID too, and like the worst kinds. Like it just seemed like if we're like if you're gonna have nonfiction content, it seems like it's celebrity based or it's Big Brother or it's The Bachelor now or something like that. There's just it's gotten so much smaller, the ecosystem there.
It's just less voices, right? You know what COVID did is COVID killed freelancing. Because inflation was out of control, prices for everything got to be so expensive, and then there was no work.
Yeah.
So unless you were a freelancer and you could work, you know, and never leave your house,
right,
that's fine. But for freelance storytellers, photographers, writers, filmmakers, like we have to be moving, we have to be meeting people, right? And so what this did is it put us all on our asses for like 3-4 years, and then there were no unique voices, no independent anything coming out because none of us could afford to do anything. And now all you've got is just this whole like celebrity ecosystem that's gone into overdrive.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I watched so many filmmakers, freelance filmmakers I know, take salaried positions that they hated because there was just some security in that. And some of those folks have now started to ease back into the like freelance space, but a lot of them are either just not filmmakers at all anymore or are locked into one of my best buds was doing a lot of commercial freelance directing. Now he's like HelloFresh's in-house content creator, and that's what he does, and he makes great money, and he feels extremely limited creative freedom. And it's just like that's the sort of exchange you had to make a lot of times. I think because of COVID, it was like, it's just gotten a lot scarier out there. I need to make sure my bases are covered, and that means making like,
yeah, how terrible is that? Like, I know, so for people who don't understand the market in China, there's a huge broadcaster in China, digital broadcaster streamer called Tencent. And they're also one of the world's largest game makers. And they like run digital everything in China. So Tencent was huge. And they had an entire like nonfiction documentary division, like 8 people working there. And you know, I would go to Beijing quite often and pitch them because I knew China really, really well from my time with the New York Times. And we were always trying to make some stories, you know, and then I ran into my buddy Jamie in Hong Kong, who was the celebrity chef who spoke fluent Chinese. And I was like, we should try to do something together. So when we went to pitch them in Beijing, like they just said yes, like, and you know, great budget, no problem. Like, I really think like 2018, 2019 was so peak risk for television and storytelling, and money's never easy, but it was easier.
Yeah.
And people were willing to just kind of jump on board with crazy ideas and, you know, see where it took us. And the landscape of stories that were available to watch and to learn was beautiful. And I just feel like that whole genre has just disappeared.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, well, so you like worked through the 2008 financial collapse, and
as a journalist,
and now through COVID, like what feels different there? Like it seemed like ironically the 2008 is what seems to have started your television career, and then COVID has just put this huge speed bump in that career. It's like, why do you feel those experiences have been so different as they have affected like the television space?
So so this is great. So in 2006, 7, 8, China was the best place to be for a young photographer because of the build up to the 2008 Olympics.
Sure.
So the 2008 Olympics were August 8th, 2008, in Beijing. And so in 2007 and 2008, every single newspaper and magazine in the world was running content stories about China.
Yeah.
And I was the trusted go-to guy that had 5 years by that time, on 5 or 6 years under my belt working with the New York Times. So I was making a ton of money. I was telling great stories. I was able to use my network in China, my experiences in China, my friends in China to deliver all this great imagery. And it was amazing. And then in September 2008, we had the Lehman Brothers collapse. And what the Lehman Brothers collapse did, apart from destroying people's lives and people losing homes and the mortgage crisis and everything that happened that we all know about, which was terrible, and we shouldn't take anything that happened, away from the people who really had their lives destroyed. But one little subsection of that was the publishing industry fell apart. So at this time, classified ads had already kind of gone online, but onto Craigslist and all these other platforms and Facebook and things like this. But then in like 2008, it really hit. And without the classified ads, the New York Times, for example, they lost massive amounts of revenue. And then of course people were buying less newspapers and wanted to see things online for free. So they went from paying their freelancers a significant amount of money per day, because we were on day rates, to much, much less.
Sure.
And this happened across Time, Newsweek, Forbes, Fortune, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Time, Sunday Times Magazine, Der Spiegel, Stern, like every single client I had, and I'm not talking about like reducing salaries by 10%. I'm talking like sometimes reducing salaries by 75%, just overnight. And I remember there was one particular client that asked me to fly from Shanghai to Chengdu, which is about a 3 hours journey, and then land in Chengdu, meet up with a driver, drive 2 hours into the countryside to do a portrait of this girl that they wanted to do a story about. So sometimes when I did work for magazines and newspapers, I would be with the writer, we'd do it together. Sometimes they would already do the story and then tell me to go get the picture after, right? So I remember this was like 2011, and the newspaper that wanted me to do this, they said I had to fly 3 hours to Chengdu, then do 2 hour drive, then take a portrait of this girl, then do 2 hour drive back, then do a 3 hour flight back. And they needed me to do it all in one day. And they didn't have a budget for me to stay at the Holiday Inn at the Chengdu airport overnight for $50. And at that moment, I was like, this is done. Like this whole way of life that I have been loving for like the last 10 years is completely finished. And I never, that from that moment on, I didn't take a professional photography job after that. I walked away totally. And then by that time, my television stuff was starting to go. And that really became the only way for me to travel and explore after that.
Yeah. It's like, did you feel like the global bounce back was faster from 2008 than COVID, or is it just a different beast entirely?
I think it was a different beast entirely, because I went from print writing and photography to television. So television, I don't really feel like they got hit by the 2008 crisis. I feel like people were still watching TV before and after. And, it was still easy to make television before 2008 and after 2008. So it was more like me rushing to get up to speed of how to make TV, how not to be fucked over by people, how to read a contract, how to keep my amazing, talented freelance partners happy, so that I could continue working with them again and again, which is really the only way I think to make great content, is to keep working with the same people.
Yes.
And not change your crew like every time you go out and this kind of thing. So I was like, how do I build like a team of 5 or 6 really talented, motivated people, and how do I keep them, happy, well paid, and creatively challenged, right? And that was like that was the 2011, 12, 13, 14 like education. But it would have been like, if that hadn't happened and I could still make lots of money being a photographer, I might still be a photographer. This is totally different because I still want to make TV. And like back in the day, I think I was done with television because I didn't see a financial path forward anymore. But here, like, people are still watching TV, and, streamers still have money. Mr. Beast is probably going to sign like $100 million deal with Amazon, right? Like, there's still plenty of money out there. And there's, like you said, like Bourdain is gone. There's huge gaps between people who, there's not a lot of people who are well-traveled, who are still, teaching people about the world. I would love to get back into it, but the landscape is so bad right now.
Right. And yeah, getting that capital up front to like make it less risky.
It really does. Yeah. No one's really taking a risk. And distributing on Amazon Prime or Tubi or YouTube, or, unless you're like getting millions and millions and millions of views on YouTube, it's really hard to generate any kind of advertising or any kind of sponsorship.
Absolutely. Yeah. We've done it. Like we've put the content all over the place. It's like I feel like any outlet we could put Ryan Pyle content on, especially in the early pandemic, we did it.
Yeah.
It's just like, yeah, I see it. Those markets are so oversaturated too. It's just, It's tough. I don't know what the future of like travel TV looks like, but it's got to be there because there's an audience for it. I mean,
I think it's just going to be on YouTube. I think it's just going to shift entirely to YouTube. And if I do a podcast and I get to chat with amazing people like you, like maybe I can also still go out and make some content, but maybe I have to do it differently. Like I don't see anyone in the next 2 years giving me enough money to go out and do 10 expeditions in 10 countries in 10 months with you sitting in LA or in Asheville, North Carolina, doing all the post-production. Like I don't see that kind of risk taking coming back to like a non-A-list celebrity.
Sure. Yeah. No, it makes sense. Yeah. No, the risk aversion is huge.
Yeah.
It's huge. Yeah. It's a bummer because, I there's just, I miss it. I like miss seeing that kind of content. Even if I weren't able to be the guy cutting it, I still want to see that content. And like Bourdain reruns are great, but he doesn't go out in nature, not like you. Like it's just like, yeah, I miss it. I want it. And I don't know. I haven't found the YouTube content is there, but I haven't found any that really like scratches that itch perfectly yet. It's it's a lot of like, because it's so many one-man crews, that Survivorman style, which can be great, but
and they're editing in themselves too. It's just because there's no money, right? Like it costs them so much to do the trip, that to bring an extra cameraman, and you cannot make broadcast quality television, just doing a one-man show. Like you could with Survivorman because it was rough and raw, but like if you want to make things really cinematic the way we did, and really like show off a place and not just me struggling in the place. Like it was a nice balance between the two things. Like you need to have a dedicated cameraman or two that are there because, and you need to have two cameramen because one of them is going to get altitude sickness. One of them is going to get dehydrated in the desert. You need someone else to be able to pick up the slack. Like it was very much, working with Chad and Jesse and Daniel from time to time as well. It's always like one of them is going to have a problem on any given day and you still need someone to be there. And like on summit day, you need someone who's, going to be able to think straight, to hold the camera. Yeah. When you get up to the top of Aconcagua at 24,000 feet or something like that, like you still need those people. And I just don't know how it's going to play out. Like I still really want to make television or maybe just documentary films. Like maybe I could get into that, but it hasn't become really clear yet. And I think part of the relocation to LA is just to start having these creative conversations again and to, and to reminisce with you like we're doing today, but also to like maybe strategize about what could be next.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. Are there any places calling to you?
Bhutan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Bhutan Trail.
The Snowman trek. Yeah. The toughest trek in the world. I still want to do that. I still want to climb, there's still a bunch of 8,000 meter peaks I want to climb.
Yeah. I
would love to do it to make content, but if it's too expensive and no one's willing to fund it, like now I'm at a stage where I just need to be out and like, I'm going to start doing stuff on my own just to get out. And But then it's just, you're taking still photos or you're taking, handheld videos like everyone else, and you're losing the ability to project your experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
Unless you've got 50 million Facebook or YouTube followers or Instagram followers, then people can really watch, right? But if you still rely on, this is the thing, like if you rely on a broadcaster to project your voice or your story, then you're in a disadvantaged minority, because now people have YouTube channels and people have social media channels that are bigger than traditional broadcasters. So people who would want to do the stuff I'm doing are kind of doing it on their own and making a great living doing it. So I think like if I want to keep this up, I think I need to transition into a space where no one could take it away from me again. Like where you're not sitting waiting for Discovery Channel to call you or for BBC to commission another round of things. Like maybe just me just going out and putting stuff up on YouTube and, hoping that it resonates and people will watch it, and then seeing what kind of revenue can come from that and seeing what kind of sponsorship. And then you're kind of building your own house instead of waiting for someone to build one for you.
Yeah. Yeah. The parrot, it's odd how there seems to have been this like decade by decade paradigm.
Every 10 years, something happens.
Oh.
Stay away from me. Stay as far away from me as possible in 2030, because something crazy will happen.
For sure, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, gosh. But I mean, made it work before. Like it's the drive is there. It's something I've always really respected about you. It's just like the drive is there. It's like never gone away. It's like you're not someone who tries and like hits a dead end and gives up by any means. Like there's always a next idea, a next thing to try, and like it's just we've maintained an exciting dialogue about potential work despite all the obstacles since 2020, and that's been really cool, because the best work I feel I've done is with you, and I miss that excitement. I always want to leave that door open, and I'm really happy that you're not like, you haven't like just thrown your hands in the air and given it all up, because it's great work. It's like it means a lot to a lot of people, and yeah, me and my creative community, it's just.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. We'll find a way. We need to just build another door to step through, I think.
Sure.
And I think that'll be the real thing. What are you looking forward to most in 2024?
Well, I've been working on a lot of music that I'm gonna try and get a label behind at some point. Music is something that has always been this other toggle that takes my focus from film. I'm either focused on music, I'm film. When I can mesh both, it's wonderful. So I'm looking forward to wrapping up this group of songs that I've been working on. I also, my goal for this year is to shoot a short, really long time, and that's just a way for me to just work that creative muscle. Filmmaking is so expensive, obviously. It's so inaccessible, but I do have enough gear on hand where I've got no excuse to not make stuff. And one of the things that drives me the most crazy since graduating from NYU is I have seen a lot of peers be like, well, it's not worth making anything if I don't have $300,000 or something. And I'm like, so silly. Like you're like an incredible artist, and there's a really good chance no one's ever going to give you that money. Like you're telling me if you don't get it, you're never going to make work. Like, come on. So I really try to make a point to like practice filmmaking, whether it be screenwriting or short film directing, whatever it is. I had an incredible opportunity to make this documentary about my friend's band in Asheville last year, which was like a wonderful way to incorporate the filmmaking interests and the music interests. So just trying to stay creatively busy, I guess, is the headline there. Just like really wanting to like not slow down, live like I'm, gonna die soon, and just like trying to get as much just like work going as possible. It's the thing that feeds me. Like if I don't have a project on the horizon or that I'm currently working on, I find myself feeling pretty aimless. Like it's how I've met almost all of my friends, is just by like starting a project and needing collaborators and do you want to hop on this with me? And then those people who show up, they end up being my best buds. And like, yeah, my life just seems better when I'm busy with projects. So I just want to, 2023 was pretty busy, but still very much like growing pains coming out of the COVID experience. So I'm hoping this year can feel a little bit more like natural in that pace of just like developing ideas, reaching out to folks, and making it happen.
Awesome. Well said. Well, we should try to find something to do this year.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
We'll make it happen. More than just a fucking podcast.
Sure. Hey, but this is great. No, I love it. This is what I'm talking about with just keeping things going. It's awesome.
Yeah. All right. I think we got some whiskey coming and maybe a friend coming over soon. So why don't we wrap this?
Absolutely.
But that's us on the widescreen. Good to see you, buddy.
Absolutely.
I'm glad we did this.
Thanks for having me.
All right.